Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лафтем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Ті, хто воде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь!
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 405 of the news, and it's good to see you all in the chat once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and a lot has happened. We've actually heard a very big announcement, both from Ukraine and the United States, that a counterattack will be coming very soon, most likely within the next couple of weeks. So we're going to be trying to cover as much as we can about that tonight, and also laying out the frontline situation as best as we can as well tonight. But before we get to that, there was some cool stuff that we actually got in the mail this weekend. It was really cool. And when we went to the P.O. box, we had like a letter, kind of like envelope thing, and a giant box. Like, the box is huge. One was sent by Robert. We're not naming off their full names just so that way, you know, they don't get tracked down or anything. But Robert and Jeff. Jeff sent us a little, I believe it was a 2x3 Ukrainian flag, which was really cool. It's really nice, actually. It's like very well made, very thick. And we really like that flag, and I got to thank Jeff for that. And then Robert came rolling in with this box. I mean, like, this box is huge. I can't even, like, describe how big it is compared to what we normally get in the mail.
He sent a whole care package.
I mean, like, this thing is qualified as a care package, and inside of it was a whole bunch of cool stuff. So I'll list off a couple of the things that I saw, and then I'll let Matthew take over on a couple of things that he saw and really liked. But the two things that really blew me away is that we actually got a 1950s radio transmitter made by iMac, which is really neat and kind of cool because, you know, this is kind of like the modern iteration of the radio on YouTube. And we also got a Soviet stopwatch. And I was like, oh my god, that's so cool. And, like, it's really cool. In fact, when I clicked the stopwatch, I heard this thing start burning inside of it. It sounded like a fuse. I'm just kidding, by the way. I'm just playing.
But yeah, definitely a joke.
But nonetheless, it was super cool. On top of that, we also got a little California Republic flag because they're from California. And we got a apron. And I believe we also got a little poster that was about politics, and we also got honey badger socks. Can't forget the honey badger socks. And Matthew actually saw a few cool things as well, so I'll let him take over real quick on that.
Yes, and super cool, Robert, and thank you very much. He also sent me I believe it's a Spyderco knife, if I'm not mistaken. It has like the little flipper, little mechanism at the top. Very cool. I'm also not sure what the blade is called, but it looks like that butcher style, like pocket knife blade. Super cool. And Robert, thank you very much for that. He told me he was going to send it beforehand, and it is really cool to have. So thank you very much to Robert, and also Jeff for that really cool Ukrainian flag.
And I gotta thank the both of you so much, because the little things we get in the mail like that are so cool to us. We really do enjoy the little things like the radio transmitter, because that's so cool. And we don't really see that kind of stuff often. In fact, I've never seen one of those things before in my life until we got one today. And so I have to thank y'all so much once again, both you, Jeff and Robert, for sending in those really cool things. And of course, before we move on into the news, many of you, and we're going to make this very quick, it's going to be about 10 seconds. So make sure to listen in. We've heard that, of course, the same person out there that's been doing this for a long time is once again back at it again, trying to say crap about this channel. We're not even going to address it. The guy is pretty much a lowlife. He sits over there and he just tries to cause this drama to drum up views. I'll make it clear, we don't really like the guy. There's a whole lot behind the story than he led on to on a stream. And with that, we're now getting into the news. Starting off with the United States news, starting off in America, because America finally announced the heavily alluded $2.6 billion support package just today. And we're going to go to that clip, well, that little bit of news right here. And from what we can tell, most of it, I believe something like $500 million at least of it, is just for ammunition alone. So that is pretty interesting here, but we also heard of some brand new equipment. And for that reason, we're going to have to pop over to the Twitter, because if I remember correctly, Matthew, we actually put a link on the Twitter that described something of a new weapon that I can't really remember the name of.
Yes, we did. It was mainly ammo, like you said, so it has some Patriot ammo, NASAMS ammo, as well as 10 mobile CUAS laser-guided rocket systems. I'm really not sure what that is, but it sounds high-tech.
Let's see here, and where is the post? Because for some reason, I'm not finding...
Should be at the very top.
Let's see, should be at the top. So let's go all the way back up to the top. Oh my god, it's right here! I skipped over it. So...
it was actually the one right before that, actually.
the one right before that. So we'll go back down. Actually back up. This one right here. So here we go. Of course, make sure to follow our Twitter. We put out news here constantly, even when the stream is not live, about things we've been seeing in the war in Ukraine. And we've actually, to make sure that we covered the Twitter, because the Twitter is really cool, we've actually made sure to, plug up a lot on here. So make sure to join the Twitter, because a lot of neat stuff happens there. But anyways, it apparently includes 10 mobile CUAS laser-guided rocket systems. I actually have not heard of this thing before, so we're going to Google it real quick, and we're going to see what this thing is. CUAS laser-guided, let's see here. It's called a rocket system. So we'll put in rocket, and we'll put that there. And let's go to images. And so it appears that this thing actually is somewhat new, because it looks like almost all the pictures on this thing on Google are of concept images of it in use. There's only one picture of what appears to be one of these systems right here, but beyond that, there isn't really a lot of physical proof that this thing exists. So this might be brand new, which is very rare for the US to send equipment and weapons that are practically brand new in US service. Of course, we still don't know a lot about the system, I've got to be entirely honest with y'all, but it looks fairly interesting, and we'll try and get more news on it as we can, but I'll cut down on that for now, since it's just another support package, and it's absolutely wonderful to know that it is that another $2.6 billion support package is on the way. Speaking of a support package, I completely forgot about this, and I don't know how, but we blew it away with Sunday night's fundraiser. The end number was $10.3 thousand in support of Razom for Ukraine. An incredibly high figure, especially at this point in the war. And I've got to thank everyone so much once again for sending a Lee Spring Army aid package to Razom for Ukraine to help Ukrainian soldiers to secure themselves a future after this war. And of course, I think that's a very important thing, is to make sure that these soldiers don't end up being the brave and valiant heroes we see today, and by tomorrow they're the person on the side of the street having to beg for cash. I don't think any soldier should have to go through that, and Razom for Ukraine, through those scholarships, will help these guys to be set up for success after this war is over, and they are able to finally return completely back to civilian life. We're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news that we saw in the United States as well, and coming out from the Pentagon today, straight from the Department of Defense, we heard that the offensive is on. Once again, plugging the Twitter, because we put it out here on the Twitter, but the United States Department of Defense has stated that an offensive could be coming within the next couple of weeks. This is big news. This is actually some of the biggest news we've heard in a while, because this is the first time that the United States has confirmed that an offensive will be on the way. And considering that they're saying it's just a few weeks away, that means that it will be falling within our original mid-April to late May window, where the weather will be the most optimal for a counteroffensive. And I've got to say, that is the perfect moment to do that. From what we can understand on weather patterns and trends inside of Ukraine, that is pretty much the ideal time in the early part of the year to launch an offensive. The ground will most likely be dried out by that point from the snows of late winter. It will most likely be solidified enough that armored vehicles can travel over fields with relative ease and not be bottlenecked onto roads where they don't get bogged down. So it is incredibly good to hear about all of that news revolving around the offensive. And we also saw that that was corroborated by a Ukrainian official in Kyiv today, which stated that it was time for Ukrainian citizens who were living in occupied territory to go to third world countries or to prepare themselves for what was coming ahead. This is something that has been a normal move by the Ukrainian government whenever an offensive will begin. They back in the day, though, they used to be very direct with where they would say people would need to leave. Like, for example, back last year, their telegram would usually say something like, if you are in the Kherson Oblast, leave immediately, an offensive will be beginning soon. And then that was actually a ruse, so that way the Ukrainian offensive in Balaklia could go forward and the Russians would be distracted in the south near Kherson. This time, however, they have not done anything like that. They have just let out a general announcement to everywhere in the occupied territories that it is time for people to start leaving and packing up if they're still there behind the lines. So this is very interesting because it appears that they're trying to keep the offensive this time a grand mystery. Where could it be coming from? We know there's two places, I'll say this, and this alone. There are two places that it will not be coming from, which is across the Dnipro River from the city of Kherson and from the area of the Bakhmut battlefield. Those two areas, the offensive certainly will not be happening, but in the southern front and in the northeastern areas, they could really be happening just about anywhere. It really all matters on what the Ukrainian military is going to be doing and saying. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news in Ukraine and moving on into Russia. There has been a lot of news about Russia, and one of the biggest bits of news is that a war blogger, a pro-Russian war blogger, was killed inside of the city of St. Petersburg the last time we covered the news last week. Not in war week time, but last week's time, like on the normal calendar. A 200-gram explosive was placed inside of a statuette that was presented to the war blogger inside of a St. Petersburg cafe, which then detonated. We actually have videos of the detonation and the aftermath immediately after the explosion, but we decided to omit those because we've been getting age restricted a lot on YouTube, and I don't know if those would also be age restricted as well, so we had to omit those. But one thing we did find out is who took credit for this attack. And this has been a big question by many people around the internet, is who in the world pulled off this attack? And last time we covered this news, we said it could be anybody. And it turns out it wasn't just anybody, it was actually the NRA.
What?
Now that sounds kind of weird. I know a lot of people in America know of a different kind of NRA, but the NRA that ended up killing the Russian blogger is called the National Republican Army, which is a group of Russian partisans that are operating inside of Russia. You can actually see that they share a very similar flag to the Freedom of Russia Legion, which is almost the exact same, but it appears that these guys operate entirely within the borders of the Russian Federation, and so while a Freedom of Russia Legion does exist in the Ukrainian army, that does not stand proof that the Ukrainians sanctioned this attack. It appears to be entirely partisan in origin. And based off of this news, we've actually seen, and I didn't include this clip tonight because we have so much news to cover, we've actually seen a couple of Russian war bloggers bow out and leave the entire realm because they're scared that they're going to be next. So fairly interesting to see that this has been going on, and a very interesting thing to note that it was not anyone from the outside of Russia, it was actually discontent Russians from the inside of Russia that did pull off this attack. We're now going to be moving on.
And do they know why they smacked him? Was there any particular reason, or just because he supported Putin?
Apparently, from what I've been hearing, this war blogger actually did serve in the Russian army and was stationed in the Donbass for a while. It appears that it may have not been during this current phase of the war, but it may have been during 2014 to 2022. And so they decided to off him, I believe, because there was alleged, and I don't really know if this is true or not at the moment because I don't really know a lot about the blogger. I believe there was alleged instances of war crimes where he killed some random civilians inside of occupied Donbass. So that seems to be right now from what we understand. And, you know, got to put heavy emphasis on what we understand because we don't know if that story is solid or exactly true or not. But that's the story I've heard today about the attack. So we're going to be running with it until we get some differing information if we ever get any. Moving on south of Moscow, we saw a site that was very disturbing to me, and is especially probably going to be very disturbing to most of y'all as well. As many of y'all, of course, know, many Ukrainian children have been taken from Ukraine and transported inside of Russia. Some of these kids are actually orphans with no parents left alive anymore, but yet the Russians took them and tried to integrate them into the Russian population. It appears that they're now starting to use these orphans, at least from this video, as a form of slave labor. And of course, when I say that, it's not exactly like the kind of concentration camp slave labor you would see in a place like the Krakow concentration camp, you know, that you would see on Schindler's List. Not the kind of slave labor like that, where if you do not meet a quota, you're taken out and shot, but they are forced to make uniforms and camouflage for the military, and we actually have a small clip of that right here, because apparently one of the Russian overseers of the small sweatshop decided that this was something to be proud of, to have orphans from Ukraine working on uniforms. You see the orphans having to work on the uniforms right here. And when you see some of the Russians working on the fine trimming. And that is that is really sickening to think about, is that these kids had their parents killed by the Russian army, then transported into Russia, and now forced to do labor to help the Russian army to continue to kill more parents of families, and then separate their children to probably be transported into Russia. It's sickening. And, you know, I usually don't say a lot about the Russian citizenry on this channel because, you know, some of them do support the war. Well, a lot of them support the war. Some of them don't support the war. But this right here is absolutely sickening. And I think that these Russian women right here are involved in this entire scheme to have them producing military uniforms is sickening to the core and should require that something possibly be done to these people if they're ever able to be held accountable, like taking them to a court and holding them responsible for some kind of indentured servitude or some form of slave labor. We're now going to be moving on from this little clip south of Moscow. We don't really know where that was inside of Russia, so I put it in Ryazan, but really it's more of a location unknown clip that came from Russia. We're now moving on down into the southern border area near Georgia. And of course, a lot of news has been being made in the southern border area. And back way early on in the war, there was actually a group of Russians, you know, more or less, that supported Putin and his invasion in Ukraine. And a lot of y'all know this guy. It's the ham and cheddar man, Ramzan Kadyrov, and his Kadyrovite Chechens. Interestingly enough, it appears that after they left the front lines, we do not know that any more Kadyrovites are on the front lines in large numbers. We assume that they're around a company level size nowadays. They've now gone back to Chechnya for the most part. And apparently there is a mosque that is going to be constructed in Moscow that is getting massive pushback from the Muscovite citizenry. A lot of people apparently do not want this mosque to be built in Moscow, and it's made such news in the Russian, I guess you could say, media circles, that the Chechen Kadyrovites have heard about it, and they actually made a little message today that is very interesting here. It may show that the splintering and the fracturing of the Russian armed forces is a little severe. In fact, very severe on the Kadyrovites' end. And so, here's the clip. I'll be making sure to read the translation off here on the bottom. We would like to address everyone, including non-Slavs and non-Muslims, who are interfering the construction of a mosque in the city of Moscow in our common Russia. We are at the forefront right now, and we have seen these videos made by different people who are not Muslims. We call on the authorities of the Russian Federation to initiate criminal investigations against these people and to speak judgments, so that other people will understand. We do not care about these multinational issues. Those who do this should be in prison or get destroyed, as in getting killed. We do not threaten you, we simply warn you. If you're against the will of the Almighty, we will fight you. We don't care who we're fighting. We'll turn a blind eye to this one time to make you reconsider. But if there will be another video like this, we will definitely come to you. Very interesting to hear from the guys who got slaughtered by the Ukrainians in the Bucha-Hostomel-Irpin area, and then also in the area of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, that they ran back home and they hardly exist anymore on the front lines, and now they're going to sit there because, you know, the Russian government is largely sponsoring state terrorists at this point. The Kadyrovites are almost thugs. They're almost... really, the best explanation I can give is Ramzan's personal bodyguard, and they really have no allegiance to anybody. And so now they're going to sit there, and they're going to tell the Russian citizenry at large, do what we say, or we're going to start committing terrorist attacks against everyone inside of Russia. Now that is bizarre. That's insane. And you would think that the Russian government would sit there and think, maybe it's probably not a good idea for us to glorify the state terrorists inside of Chechnya right now, because they're openly threatening everyone else in Russia. They're not just fighting the Ukrainians, they're going to end up probably blowing up a subway in Moscow before long. Yet they're going to let them keep on persisting. They'll probably keep glorifying them, although the Kadyrovites have started to fall out of the mainstream news circles in Russia and here in the West. They're still brought up every once in a while, and I wonder if this little video and this little statement is going to start changing that fact. With that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip and on towards the Black Sea and near Sochi, which is just miles away from Putin's summer resort, more so for himself, a private mansion. As many of y'all know, air defenses have been erected near the area of the mansion, and it appears that the air defenses, in fact, are increasing in their spread. In fact, going as far south as Sochi. And this is a little bizarre. This is actually incredibly weird, because most of the air defenses for Putin's mansion have actually been placed on the shoreline from Putin's mansion north of the mansion towards Tuapse. It appears that they're now also setting up air defenses to the south, which means that there is some kind of a paranoia, at least on Putin's end, that an attack may not just be coming from the north. There may be missile attacks that are flying in, or some other kind of attack that may be flying in from a southern direction near West Abkhazan, which is the legally controlled part of Georgia that Russia considers its puppet. And this is very interesting because we got a picture of one of these things today, and it appears that it's somewhere outside of Sochi, probably just by a few miles, but this air defense system is being set up to the south. And that shows that at least Putin is getting incredibly paranoid about what may be happening to him. As far as we understand it as well, this air defense perimeter is made up of more surface-to-air missile batteries than we've seen anywhere else, even in the Moscow area, from what we've seen on video and picture evidence. And they're now starting to expand the air defense perimeter every month, a little bit further away from Putin's mansion. At this point, it's multi-layered air defense. If they make it through the first layer, there's a second layer and even a third layer. And each of these pantsirs costs $15 million. So let's just hypothesize that there's around 20 of these pantsirs in the air defense perimeter. So we have 20 times, 20 times times 15 million. It costs $300 million in Pantsir air defense systems to protect Putin's mansion. And that's absolutely insane when you think about it. And that's $300 million of air defenses that they could send into Ukraine to get promptly destroyed. Absolutely crazy to think how paranoid Putin's gotten, and also that they're starting to take air defense systems to start putting them towards their southern direction, showing they trust nobody and the attack in their mind could come from anywhere. We're now going to be moving on from the Russian news. Well, actually, real quick, there's a little bit of quote-unquote Russian news because it's in the illegally held area of Crimea. We saw that the Kerch Bridge is still down today. And of course, it didn't get blown up, because that's been something that a lot of people always talk about. It hasn't been blown up, but it did catch on fire back in October. And 7 whole months later, we got a video clip of them today finally bringing forward a brand new, prefabricated bridge span and putting it back up onto the bridge. One thing I would love for everyone to note is that the second span is unusable. You will see in a second. So we're going to mute the music. We can see them getting ready to lift up the new span that they brought in. Now, notice this. There is a little walkway right here, but train traffic is not crossing over this bridge. They've had to replace both of these spans, and work crews, from what we've seen on video evidence, are using both spans of the railroad bridge for repair and maintenance. So the entire bridge, as far as railroad logistics goes, has been completely shut down for, from what we understand, probably several months on end. This is, of course, opposite of what some people insist, because almost everyone in the world has been saying one thing or another about this, about we knew the bridge was always down, or no, the bridge was never down because CBS rode a train over it. And then, CBS got, well, I'm not going to say that, but anyways, I was about to,
they got wrecked.
Yeah, I was about to throw out a good one there, but we'll save that one for later. Anyways, the bridge has been down. It's been down for repairs, and apparently the Russians put the CBS crew's life at risk by taking a train and running it over the bridge, because from what we know, either there was limited traffic crossing the bridge for a good while, or there's been no traffic crossing at all, and especially during this this bridge maintenance. We can now see them lifting the new span into place. You can still see the burn damage over here on this side, and it appears, real quick, I have to point this out, it appears that a commuter train did pass for a moment, so it may actually be that they're opening it up for limited traffic service. Actually, a cargo train passed. Wait a minute. Hang on. I'm going to have to correct that real quick. It appears that it is still open, unlike what we've been saying for a good while. Maybe limited traffic. but it is still open nonetheless. So I'm going to have to go back and correct that because we saw 2 trains pass. Of course, this is a time lapse over an entire day, but even 2 trains is limited traffic, not no traffic at all. We see them still lifting up the railroad span.
You know what the Ukrainians should do is let them totally get this put all back together, reassemble it, and then hit it again.
You know, they should. I would back that up completely. Who wants to see the Crimean bridge get hit again? I would.
Yeah,
like
but wait
to
for
see
it to finish though. Like make it make insult to injury here.
And you know, when it happens, we're going to have to call up Operator Starsky again. We're going to have him on the air. And also, another thing that some people have been saying, nobody really knows what caused the bridge to explode. Of course, a lot of people are now saying that it was the truck that the Russians filmed that blew up the bridge. But Starsky and me, back when we talked about this off stream, we actually came to the conclusion that it was either a kamikaze boat or a missile that blew up the bridge. So we still don't really know exactly what it was. We're still taking pot shots at that. But an explosion did occur. Regardless how it occurred, the Ukrainians do have the ability to attack it, and hopefully they'll be able to blow it up again. I always have faith in the Ukrainian military that they could do what's nearly impossible at any given moment. We're now going to be moving on from the Crimean news and on up into the Western Ukrainian area. And this has been fairly interesting today because for one of the first times ever, we saw a video that was taken of train traffic in the area of the western border, but not taken in Poland. This video was taken in Ukraine, and it's showing a fairly decent shipment, a fairly large amount of AS-90 SPGs from the United Kingdom that are now on their way through Ukraine, around the Lviv area. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and yes, I'm finally learning how to count. I still can't do math, though. 13.
Chester, that was a low blow. Oh my goodness.
14. 14 AS-90s on this single train, at least from where the video began. And yes, man, Sky Girl, I don't need a calculator for this one. Although it was getting very challenging once it got above number 9. I was really starting to struggle right there. But 30 of these are going to be sent to Ukraine. So we just saw 50% of the AS-90s that the British have pledged to Ukraine passing over a rail line inside of Ukraine. That means the AS-90s have arrived in fairly good numbers. 50% of them are already in Ukraine, and we may be seeing these things in operation near the front lines alongside the Panzerhaubitze 2000s, the FH-70s, the M777s, the Crabs. Let me think of all the other SPGs that have been sent. The M109s, and so on. There's probably some I'm not naming there, but the list goes on and on. That's probably one of the best things, well, the largest amounts of objects that we've been sending to Ukraine are artillery pieces, of course, because artillery is the winner of the battlefield. And by historical evidence, because I would like to make everyone, I would like everyone to remember, we base our analysis on this channel off of historical precedent. Artillery is the winner of most battles. Artillery actually caused the most casualties in the First World War than any other weapon. Even against the feared and venerable machine guns used in the First World War, artillery was still the #1 killer. And throughout most wars, artillery is the weapon that will usually be inflicting the most damage on an opposing force. That is a given rule ever since the invention of the first cannons around the late 14th and early 15th centuries. With that, we're now going to be moving on from this little clip and on over into eastern Poland, heading towards the border from Rzhów to Lviv, where we saw some Belgian equipment moving in. Now, everyone knows Belgium. You know, everyone always talks about Belgium for its Belgian waffles, its beautiful little towns. Honestly, I don't know. I feel like we might need a poll on this later. But the Netherlands, like, what looks better? What country looks better? The Netherlands or Belgium? I'm very interested in what people think about that from Europe, because you always hear good things about both of them, like in terms of their scenery and how nice it is there. But which one actually wins out over the other? Belgium or the Netherlands? I'm very interested, but
I'm
not
going with the Netherlands personally.
me personally. I would say the Netherlands. We haven't really seen a lot of Belgium on this channel. We have a lot of Dutch viewers though that have shown us their beautiful little towns. I love the Netherlands. We do have some Belgian viewers though, so I want to know which one's more beautiful, Belgium or the Netherlands. Please, if you're from Europe, please make sure to vote, because I would like to know. Or if you've ever been to both of them, you know, and you're from America or elsewhere, vote and let us know, because I would love to know what folks think about those two countries. But the Belgians may have a beautiful little country, and it may be somewhat small, you know, especially even compared to the normal European states like France and Germany. Belgium is quite a small country, yet they still have a military, a fairly decent military as a matter of fact, and we saw some of that Belgian equipment from the Belgian armed forces on a train being transported towards the border of Ukraine. You can see some Belgian supply trucks right here. I don't really know what kind of make or variant that is. We see them passing on by a large amount of supply trucks, which are always desperately needed to improve the logistical situation.
You know, these trucks don't look as old as those old jalopies that Russia constantly uses.
Yeah, you know, like these things look like they're probably from the 90s. Let's see if I can find them. Belgian, I spelled that so wrong. Belgian military, trucks. So let's see here. It looks like that one, actually. And it's called the Iveco LMV Lynx. So let's type in the Iveco LMV Lynx. The Iveco. That is not it. That's not it. Let me go back and let me try and look at another one. 240 military. Holy moly. That one's a Volvo, clearly. Are these Volvos? Are we just not able to see the logo well?
Oh, it says Volvo N10 up there on the, like, caption.
Oh my god. I can't read either.
Oh my goodness.
I can't add. I can't read. I am really from Alabama. I really am. That's the proof right there. If y'all ever wonder, is he from Alabama? Yeah. And then people will sit there and be racist against Alabamians and go, oh, Alabamians, you know. But anyways, where in the world can we find some information about the Volvo N10? Like some actual information as to when it was first made. Because I'm not really seeing that here. Let me go to militarytoday.com.
Maybe Volvo. Oh, there it is.
Entered service in the 1970s. It doesn't give us an exact year, but just the 1970s. So let's go look at the Ural 4320, and let's figure out when that thing was put into service. According to Wikipedia, actually the exact same time. It's just that it's an incredibly outdated looking design.
Jeez, yeah, that tells you how much a design can make and break a vehicle. The Volvo looks like it's 20 or 30 years newer than this Ural.
Yeah, I mean, this thing looks like it's from the 90s. This thing looks like it's from, like, the 1960s. I mean,
they probably had this design around since the beginning of the Soviet Union.
Oh, probably. They probably had it, like, in a design bureau in the 30s and just sat on it for 40 years and then finally put it into service. But, God, man, I gotta tell you, man. I mean, like, Russian and Soviet vehicles always look like they're very, like, rugged, but at the same time, they look ancient. Even the new ones look ancient. But anyways, moving on from that, we're going to allow this video to play to just show you all the sheer number of supply trucks that are flooding in. And it's a load of vehicles, dozens of them, on the single train. And Candy Nose Twinskin said, I bet the Enforcer plays the banjo. I do, but hardly. That sounds terrible.
I forgot you did.
I do,
that.
yeah. And so with that, that's the end of the clip, but as you can see right there, a massive load of supply trucks that the Ukrainians will be able to most likely count and rely on to deliver vital supplies to the front lines where they're needed. We're now going to be moving on from the western area of the border and on into our location unknown news. There is actually a good amount of it to cover today. We had 6 from today and 3 from day 404, which was yesterday, and we're going to be starting with day 405's first and then going to day 404, which is yesterday, and just covering some of the news that we were not able to cover since we are not live on Mondays. But before we get into any of this, we've been running some fairly interesting polls. Some pretty good ones. And real quick, Matthew, can you guide us through those polls and tell us what we got?
And yes, of course, for the first question segment, we have 3 polls to address. And the very first one I put up says, the U.S. commits to another $2.6 billion military aid package to Ukraine, and it includes rocket systems this time. And what are your thoughts? 74% said it's an excellent package, 7% said unsure, 15% said it could have been better, and 4% said it's a mediocre package. And I have to say, when we're talking about billions of dollars, $2.6 billion, I would say that's an excellent package. That means a lot of ammunition, a lot of artillery ammo, as well as those rocket systems. Now, Enforcer, one thing I'm not sure if I saw earlier was how much were those rocket systems individually?
We don't really know how much the rocket systems were, unfortunately. I don't think we ever got a number on that.
Because I was asking just out of curiosity to know how much of the 2.6 billion went into equipment versus ammunition.
We don't really know. I think from what we understood, with the information we got, most of the money went into ammunition, and a smaller amount of money went into equipment.
Interesting. So, to me, it seems like maybe the U.S. is continuing to help stockpile weapons and ammunition for Ukraine to use in their offensive. And I would say this is probably not intended to maintain the defense, but instead to stockpile, like I mentioned. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's most likely just support to keep the Ukrainian artillery running right now, and there's probably a very small amount of surplus left over to stockpile ammunition with. If I go back, for example, and take a look at, let's see, amount of shells fired in the First World War, about 1.5 billion shells were fired during the First World War on the Western Front alone. So let me go to the calculator and do some math real quick. So we got 4 times 365. We'll just round it out and say it's a nice even 4 straight years of war, since it went from 1914 to 1918. It's a little over 4 years, I believe. It's like 4 years and 3 months, but we'll just round it down to 4 straight years. So we take that, and then we take 1.5 billion divided by 1460. So let me flip my phone sideways. 1.5 billion divided by 1,460. And of course, you know, it's not a consistent amount of artillery fire. It's not like the artillery works on a schedule. They would conduct massive barrages during offensives and such things like that. But just in the First World War alone, on a given day, somewhere around 1,020,000. That's actually a really high number. This is incredibly high. And I'm guessing that this is across all artillery pieces, not just the heavy artillery, but 1,027,397 artillery shells were fired per day for 4 years straight during the First World War. At least according to that math. So it kind of gives you an idea. And of course, those were the greatest powers in Europe fighting at that moment. You know, it's not... I would say that Ukraine's probably going to have less artillery usage because these were the largest and most economically successful countries at the time, excluding the United States, which already was the biggest economic power in the world by that point. All the largest countries below the United States were involved in a war with the biggest industrial bases that the world had ever seen. And of course, that would carry on over into World War II as well. But it gives you an idea of how expensive it was and how many shells were needed to just keep the war running at a consistent pace. And so, going off of that, and also, my God, man, just one guy, apparently, according to this, calling in his colleagues, bring in between 50,000 and 75,000 tons of ammunition a year.
Jeez, that's a lot.
Let's see. Wait, hang on. This is actually about callings and them diffusing unexploded ordnance in World War I battlefields. 50,000 to 75,000 tons of diffused ordnance per year at this given moment, almost over 100 years, almost 110 years after the First World War started. That's how many unexploded munitions they're still pulling out of the ground.
That's crazy. And that was back in 2007, it looks like.
Yeah, that was way back in 2007. And of course, this gives y'all a really good idea about the kind of supply requirements a military needs to keep a war running. And so going off of this, I would have to say that there is probably a very small amount of that ammunition in terms of cost that will actually be able to be saved over. They're probably just using loads of it on the front lines as soon as they get it, because ammunition is always a thing that is very hard to come across. And of course, referencing the First World War again, which is the war won by just artillery and machine guns nearly alone as the two major war winners, the artillery fired so many shells at the beginning of the war in 1914 on both sides that for about 2 or 3 months after the Battle of the Frontier, both sides really just came to a standstill because there were no shells left, except for just a small amount on both sides. So then they had to sit there and start working up their war industry and start mass producing ammunition and shells so that way their artillery could continue to keep the work up. But that gives a little bit of an explanation right there as to how many shells it takes. And so it's a great package. It's certainly helping the Ukrainians to keep this war running, which is what counts. But wars are expensive and ammunition is burned through quickly. And so they're probably only going to be able to save a small amount of it for future offensives. But with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well. It gave a little bit of a historical precedent to show what that support means. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second poll says, U.S. analysts say that Ukraine will conduct its counteroffensive this month, meaning it's game on. And what are your thoughts? 53% said it is true and it is game on. 14% said unsure. 26% said I'm leaning toward game on. And 7% said it's false and just a feint. And I think Ukraine will probably be gearing up to conduct that offensive this month. And that's crazy to think. That's only a few weeks. So it could happen anytime this month, in my opinion. But like I said, I think the ammo and stuff is being sent in such large quantities right now to help build up and stockpile for that offensive. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it's most likely not a feint, considering that the weather conditions are ideal. Of course, coming here in a few weeks, they should be ideal. The ground should have been drying out at that point. It should be completely dried out by the time the offensive begins, and the armor will have a pretty decent room to move. And of course, during most of this war, the Ukrainians have been operating largely off of infantry-based tactics and strategies because they're on the defensive. So Tanks work well in the defensive. You can use tanks in the defensive, but tanks are best suited to offensive maneuvers, of course. Historically, tanks are offensive weapons. You can go back to, in case if no one believes me, go back to the press interview that General Schwarzkopf made during the middle of the Gulf War, one of them, and you'll most likely hear him explain that tanks are offensive weaponry and that the United States, quote-unquote, had destroyed Iraq's future abilities to commit offensive wars by destroying their armor and their artillery. So by destroying armor and artillery, of course, you're wiping out an offensive ability. So tanks are inherently, according to Schwarzkopf, an offensive vehicle. And so the Ukrainians have to rely on the weather to be conducive for tank warfare, because that's going to be the driving motive and a lot of the firepower backing up the infantry as they continue to advance towards their own objectives. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the third poll says, Russia says it will respond strategically and tactically to Finland becoming a NATO member, and what are your thoughts? 82% said Russia will do nothing, 3% said unsure, 12% said they might do something, and 2% said Russia will respond harshly. Now, Russia says this about everything, so I completely understand when I see people saying that's a joke, because it is a joke. Russia always bluffs, does all this rough talk, and it never carries anything out. I saw somebody say on Twitter that the Russians are probably going to strategically and tactically shed tears, and that's probably all they're going to do. So I'm with the 82% for sure. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, I was going to say the Russians are going to strategically cry about it, but you pretty much still that. I was like,
Yes.
dang it. But yeah, what are they going to do? If Finland is officially in NATO now, because they've finally gone through the last process, so they are an official NATO member now, what will the Russians really do? There's nothing they can do. If they attack Finland, they invoke Article 4, which by default almost invokes Article 5, which means that a conventional war begins. St. Petersburg is immediately screwed. The Arctic fleet in Murmansk and also the Baltic fleet in St. Petersburg are immediately destroyed at that point because there's really nowhere for them to run and nowhere for them to hide. And so the Russians screw over their navy and have about half of it destroyed at the outset of the war, and they also lose the second largest economic sector in Russia, which is St. Petersburg. Then, of course, the U.S. forces, well, NATO forces as a whole, will be advancing towards Moscow, and then U.S. forces will most likely enter Ukraine and start to support the Ukrainian effort in pushing the Russians out from there. And you may see some kind of alliance made in between Ukraine and NATO. They probably won't actually make Ukraine an official NATO member in the war, but there will be an alliance and probably some kind of a verbal agreement that Ukraine will become a NATO member once the war is concluded. But of course, NATO would stomp the Russians so efficiently that they would probably pull out the nukes as soon as U.S. forces started to besiege St. Petersburg and they started rolling down the highway unopposed towards Moscow, they would probably start pushing the buttons and firing the nukes. So I would say there's really nothing they can do. There's really no response they can make unless if they wanted to go into all-out nuclear war, probably within weeks or months. So with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so that was our last poll. So, of course, we're moving on to our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a $12 Super Chat from Mike D. And he says, will the Abrams, Strikers, Bradleys, Leopards, and Challengers be the game changer to end this war by fall? And we called Russia's bluff on everything. They are on their knees with the 1950s equipment.
And thank you so much for the support. And to answer that question, yes, the tanks and offensive vehicles, such as the infantry fighting vehicles and the main battle tanks together, will most likely be some kind of a war finisher. Also, BC Skyman said lag. Oh man, lag. I don't see any. I don't see any. I don't think we're going through lag. But to move on back to answering that question, they should be game changers, mostly because the tanks will be able to do things that Soviet-era tanks really can't due to their improved sights and ergonomics. The Western tanks also have a higher crew survivability, which means that these tanks can take a hit and keep on running. And also these tanks can give a hit and stop another tank from running, like a Soviet-era tank, like a T-80, a T-90, or a T-72. They could pretty much knock any of those out. And of course, they can easily wipe out anything from the 1950s, like a T-54, or from the 1960s, a T-62. It should be incredibly easy, because we saw that they were able to do that like it was a knife cutting through butter in the Gulf War in Iraq. So they certainly should be able to pull off something like that. And I wouldn't doubt it for a minute that these vehicles will be a game changer once they're introduced to the front lines. From what we also understand, the number of tanks that have currently been pledged to Ukraine should be enough to raise 10 entire battalions that are using nothing but Western tanks and armored personnel carriers. So it appears that those 10 to 11 battalions that are being hypothetically proposed, they'll be made up of nothing but Western equipment. Those may become the Ukrainians' stormtroopers in a way, like the stormtroopers of the Imperial German Army of the First World War, or the trench raiders of the Canadians and the American forces. Those may be the ones that are used to punch through the line and create a breakthrough, where the other Ukrainian units that are still mostly using Soviet-era weaponry can then move on through at a high speed, pretty much unopposed, and start to spread quickly behind Russian lines, forcing some kind of a large retreat until the Russians can reform a defensive line. That may be the strategy that the Ukrainians are going with, because they're most likely not going to try and whittle down the effectiveness of Western vehicles by trying to integrate a few here and there into every single unit. It would be much more effective for them to solidify all of these modern weapons into a couple of single battalions and then use those battalions on the battlefield as standalone, like shock troops or something similar. So with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well, and thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Chase Maddie, who puts in a $21 donation, and he says, I like how y'all handle the haters. And do you remember the video where a raccoon stolen in Kherson by Russian invaders bites the Kherson collaborator and trader Volodymyr Saldo when he tries to pet him? It's priceless, and please share.
I've not seen that. I've never seen a video of a raccoon biting a man. But
We've seen the beaver attacking the guy in the trench, though.
Dude, that beaver was like a little tank, man. That thing was not taking anything from anyone. But
have you seen Ukraine turn the beaver into like a national icon now?
Really?
Yeah, they're making a big deal out of that beaver.
That's it. Dude, right now, some guy from like the Hudson Bay area is like, oh my god, that's like $5. Like, I'm gonna get it. But anyways, I'm just kidding about the whole Hudson Bay thing, because I know we have a lot of Canadian viewers. You know, y'all know about the Hudson Bay Company. Anyways, I thank you so much for sharing that with us. I never saw that. If anyone could share a link with us on that, I would love to see a link of that video. And also, let's see, like y'all handle the haters. We try and handle the haters the best we can. One thing that was misrepresented heavily in that address, it was loaded with lies. I mean, it was nothing but lies, and they were clearly visible. You know, this guy was literally showing communications in between him and me, and if you look at the timestamps and you look at the full details, none of what he said had any truth to it. And another thing is that the guy sits there and says we're attacking him unsolicited, but this guy sat there and he attacked the validity of our news, and that's why we riff on the guy. And as long as he attacks the validity of this news and the and the good quality of the viewers on this channel, we'll continue to riff on the guy. But anyways, I do thank you so much for the support. I sadly never saw the raccoon video though, and thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a question from CK Bold. He puts in a $10 super chat and says, take a live chat question.
And we will take a live chat question. And thank you so much once again for the support. And of course, helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, what do we got for a live chat?
All right, and the live chat question goes to, let's see here, CME for PC. He says, did that NRA group also claim responsibility for the Dugina car bomb?
I don't think they did claim responsibility for the Dugina car bomb. I don't think anyone ever stepped forward and took responsibility for the car bombing. That one was actually one that the Russians have investigated, and I don't even think that anyone actually made an official statement in the Russian government as to who committed that car bombing. I mean, hell, honestly, with how they quickly swept that under the rug, it may have been the Russians themselves that tried to commit the car bombing, maybe because the guy was getting greater ambitions than are allowed within the Russian government. But we don't really know who did that car bombing, at least from our end with the news we've been collecting. So with that, I thank you for this. Thank you for sponsoring a live chat. I hope we address that live chat the best we can, and thank you all so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Y'all are the only folks who make this channel possible. We of course don't have ads. We don't have sponsors. We rely completely on y'all for support. And so I got to thank y'all so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep on covering the news and keep on running fundraisers like the one we had on Sunday, where we blew it out of the park and raised $10.3 thousand. And so with that, we're now moving on out of the question segment and back into the news. And we're going to be moving into the Northeastern area. Of course, the Northeastern area has been incredibly quiet. And from what we've seen, there's not a lot of activity happening up here whatsoever. And I'll show you all the past 48 hours just to show. So here is the past 48 hours. And of course, you can see from the 2nd to the 4th, nothing's really happened. There's been some very minor frontline shifts, but we actually haven't seen any control gained by the Ukrainians. It appears to be Russians repositioning and the map changing because of that. We're now going to be moving on into the video evidence that we have in this area. We only have 2 clips, but starting off, we saw that the 92nd Brigade hit the Russians with their mortars, and it appears that the fire was incredibly effective. So we're going to be muting that. And we can see the Russians right here highlighted in red, and we can now see their silhouettes moving along the tree line. And we can now see a mortar spread fire pretty much in like almost a creeping barrage in a way, straight down the side of these guys. But it appears that the shrapnel may have not hit them, but it did make them lay low. We can now see that the mortars are adjusting their fire directly onto the tree line, and we're now seeing direct hits peppering this Russian squad. We can now see them getting up and moving away as smaller, most likely grenade fire is hitting the squad, and it appears that the front end of the squad, to the left side of the screen, has now been wiped out. We can now see another mortar round hit the other part of the squad, knocking out a couple of more of them. And we can now see the squad conducting a retreat. Of course, they're leaving the ones that were hit behind. And as we can see in this clip, which we're not going to show, a decent amount of them did sleep in the field that day. And I've got to say, fields are not comfortable to sleep in. It's always better to have a purple mattress. We're not sponsored by them or anything, but just saying. Anyways, we're moving on down further south from the Svatove area, and in between Svatove and Crimean, somewhere around the area of Krasnorochinske. Today we saw that, of course, the Russians are still using their very limited number of T-90Ms on the battlefield. They only had about 30 of these, and from what we understood, 16 of these main battle tanks have been destroyed. Most of the ones that we've seen on picture evidence are somewhere around the Bakhmut area, apparently being used by the Wagner. They have around 5 or 6 of them, and the rest of them that still remain, the 9 or 8 of them, are scattered about in very small numbers around the rest of the front lines. Today we saw that the 66th Brigade actually encountered one of these T-90Ms and was able to destroy it with an anti-tank weapon. We don't get an explanation of what kind of anti-tank weapon this was, unfortunately. It could have been anything. It could have been a Stugna, it could have been a Javelin, but we did see the round come right over the tank, exploding nearby. And we now see it being hit directly. It appears that it hit the engine bay and has caught the engine bay on fire, knocking the tank out, because while the T-90M is incredibly advanced, the tank still relies on its engine for hydraulic power to operate the turret and also to reload the gun. Oh, I did?
Yep. Yep. I think
No
we
way!
missed
Oh my God!
locations unknown and also the casualties report.
We'll get back to that then. But of course, another T-90M knocked out. If the engine's gone, the tank is pretty much gone. And so the crew, although we didn't see it in the film, most likely abandoned the vehicle afterwards and has now been sitting there, most likely burning and destroyed, meaning that the Russians have now lost 17 confirmed T-90Ms. We're now going to be moving on from the Northeastern news. I thought we had covered the location unknowns. We're going to be moving back to the location unknowns and starting to cover those starting on today and then going back towards tomorrow, where we saw that a Ukrainian soldier was able to save his knees. As you can see,
Vietnamese.
Vietnamese. We saw right here that an AK-74 fired a 5.45 bullet at this guy's knee pad, and the knee pad literally saved his knee. It absorbed the entire bullet, and the bullet did not actually make it into hitting his knee. It just stopped a little bit outside of the knee pad. So this guy literally saved his knees. Very lucky for this guy, and great to see. We're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit, where we saw a Ukrainian tank driving through the sludge. We actually saw a column of them driving through the sludge that you'll find right now during the end of the Rasputitsa season. We can see them having to drive through it. And, oh, dude, that mud is horrendous, man. It makes Alabama mud look like child's play right now.
It does. It's so wet.
It's so juicy. Call this stuff a
I guess
grapefruit.
I guess it's better to have like really slushy mud instead of like really thick.
Yeah, I mean, like Alabama mud's like cake batter nearly. It's just like, but this stuff is cake batter too, because when you see people's boots in pictures, it just cakes on. But I mean, like, it looks so much worse in Ukraine. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. But of course, a Ukrainian column, it looks like T-64 BMs moving forward to fight on the front lines. We don't really know exactly where, but of course, the muddy conditions are incredibly difficult for tanks. This is jeopardizing for them because one wrong move and driving into just a little bit more of a slushier area of this path, and this tank will most likely get bogged down and require recovery. We're now moving on into our next clip of news, where we saw a Ukrainian conduct a one-handed reload. We haven't seen this often. But here's the clip. In fact, we haven't seen this at all. So the soldier is in a training yard. He fires the gun. It dry fires. He then holds it with his leg, flips out the mag, puts in a new one, and then reloads it, and then fires it at the cameraman again. Talk about flagging. Like, very impressive, but talk about flagging. Matthew, we're gonna have to do this when we're on the range one day. Hey, watch this. But anyways,
hey man, the cameraman never dies, so he's good.
That is the rule. The cameraman just never dies, never. And so with that, we're now moving on from this clip. Very interesting to see a one-handed reload. And in the next clip, we saw a Russian soldier that was injured and captured by the Ukrainians actually tell the Ukrainians that his friends tried to kill him once he was injured. And so here's the interview, and this is fairly interesting here because we've heard of Russians abandoning wounded soldiers. We've never heard of them trying to kill a wounded soldier. So here's the clip. We went into this forest and there was hell.
Там просто начался ад. По нам били со всех
We were hit
сторон,
from all
со
sides,
стрелкового
from the
оружия,
rifle,
с
from
РПГ.
the RPG.
Я попытался
I tried to hide
спрятаться за
behind a tree to
деревом,
wait for the shooting.
чтобы переждать стрельбу. Но в этот момент получил огнестрельное
But at that
ранение
moment, I
в
was shot
область
in the left
левого
side.
бока. Позже я слышал, как по мне работали
Later, I heard
два
how two machine guns were
пулемета
firing
с
at me
двух
from
сторон.
both sides.
А пацанов я больше не видел.
I didn't see the guys anymore.
Только уже когда светало, мимо меня пробежало двое.
Only when it was dawn, two guys
Со
ran
стороны
past me from the
позиции
side of
ВСУ.
the AFU position.
Я им кричал,
I shouted to
подождите
them,
меня,
wait
так
for me,
как
because
я
I
не мог
couldn't move on my own.
передвигаться самостоятельно. Но они меня
But they left
бросили
me and ran
и
away.
убежали. По мне
I
работали
was hit by
минометы
mortars
и
from
свои,
both
и
sides because
чужие,
no
и
one knew I was
пулеметы и
there.
свои, и чужие, потому что никто не знал, что я нахожусь там. Никто не знал,
one
что
knew
я
that I was
свой.
one of them.
Та сторона не знала, что я свой.
That Russian army side didn't know at all.
Работала по мне,
It was firing at
думая,
me,
что я
thinking that
враг.
I was the
А
enemy.
другая сторона знала, что
And the
я
other
чужой,
side knew
и
that I
тоже
was one of
работала
them
по
and was
мне.
firing at me too.
Я оказался
I was
между
between
двух
two
огней.
fires. This guy got wounded. To summarize the story, the guy got wounded. He was laying on the ground, and so the Russians decided, oh, you know, we're just going to start shooting at him and the Ukrainians. So they started lobbing mortars at him and then firing rifles right over his head. And somehow he survived the entire ordeal and then was captured by Ukrainian forces, where he's now giving this interview. Pretty messed up to hear, and that I'm sure that doesn't really do much to bolster morale for the Russian infantry that realize that they're firing at one of their own guys with mortars and of course rifles. With that, we're now moving on from that little bit of location unknown news and on to our next bit, where we saw some Russian captured prisoners being fed some interesting foods like teas and sweets, which are a luxury even for the Ukrainians. Блядь, I'm stunned, guys. This is a PSDK, блядь. You have a lot of people. We were led by the police as if we were the 200. They even drove us to the police station. We were the group of 200 they handed over the radio. PSDK. You have a lot of camouflage. I'm effing stunned. It does not matter who you are. Who could find you? Did you come here with a car? Yes. PSDK, блядь. Was there anyone in Ukraine? No. How are you? Fine. Fine. Do you like it? We went to work. Did you want to? We went to work. To the sea and the sky.
Did
you come to work again? No, we promised one thing. And another. We went to work. Блядь, they are making fun of you. We went to the hospital. We all went to the hospital. We were sent to the hospital. Take more. Take two. Two. Kolyan, take two. Thank you. Can I bring you a candle? So that it's not cold? Already brought. There are candles, there's water. There's water, there's tea. There's tea, there's food. Guys, do you see what kind of... can I ask for strong tea? Take it. There's kiwi for you. What? Kiwis in this time of year? What the hell? Dude, these guys are being treated like royalty. Now they will give you strong tea, chicken bled. Now they will give you hot tea. Bled. Who is wearing gloves? Hold it because it's hot. They brought, oh my god, Matthew. They're doing too much for these guys. They literally brought a little teapot. Like, you know, one of the kind that you see at your grandmother's house. Oh my god.
Man, how in the world they transported this teapot? That thing looks fragile as hell.
I don't know. I have no idea. But then again, I don't know how in the world that little radio transmitter like tube made it to us. Well, it was like packed in styrofoam, like a massive amount of styrofoam. Like almost the whole inside of the package was like nothing but styrofoam. And I gotta say that package was packed really good by Robert. I mean, like, that was unbelievable packing. But anyways, I don't know how they got that there. I guess they packed it really well.
That'd be stressing me out trying to like transport that through a war zone.
Yeah, I mean, like, dude, it looks really nice too. It kind of looks, I don't know, I'm not really a big teapot person. It kind of looks a little pricey though. But then he says, no, the teapot's hot. I will hold. This is a cup.
Все.
Oh.
Все, давайте.
Thank you.
Не беспокойте нас до утра.
Do not disturb us until morning. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. But fairly wild to see that they went through such efforts to provide them tea and water. I know that some of y'all are like, well, what was up with the yellow tape on that guy's head? Remember that they sit there and tie up the tape so that way they can put the beanie on their heads and then bind them with the tape. So there's going to be yellow tape on captured Russians because while the Ukrainians also use it to identify themselves, they also use it as like temporary handcuffs and blindfolds whenever they need to. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our last bit from the Kyiv Independent today, showing the Russian losses on day 405. And they have been getting on up there again, although the infantry losses are getting a little bit lower at the same time. Of course, Bobcat skid steers abound. There are loads of them, a never-ending supply of them.
Man, and there wasn't even a kill of a Bobcat this day. I see, so I put, oh no, and there's Enforcer Matt climbing into a Bobcat. Oh boy.
Oh man. But anyways, moving on from that, I love that people are putting those Bobcats down, though. That's really cool to us. 530 Russian soldiers have been killed over the past 24 hours. This is more so comparable to the average over the course of the war. For about 10 months of the war, this would be the average number on any given day. 6 armored personnel carriers were destroyed. That's getting more so towards the average. 9 supply trucks were destroyed. That's on up there, actually, about 2 or 3 above the normal average in supply truck losses. We also saw that 8 tanks were lost, 3 artillery pieces, 15 drones, an MLRS, and then nothing in any other category. Of course, the artillery losses are actually a little low. We've been seeing them destroying, on average, at least an entire artillery battery's worth of artillery pieces, but that number did drop. The tank losses, however, were a little high. Usually we only see about 5 of them getting destroyed today on an average. Today we saw about 8, so it is a marked increase compared to the average over the course of this war. And so, of course, there's your casualty report for the day. It's looking pretty decent. It's not the highest or the best we've seen over the war, but the losses are still racking up for the Russians. We're now going to move on to the day 405. I don't know what the hell's happening with me stuttering these days, but the day 404, location unknown news, where we saw an M240 machine gun being used on the front line. See them setting up the M240? We see him putting out small bursts, almost using it like a rifle. And with that, that's the end of the clip, and hopefully this guy enjoys the M240. We're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into the next one, where we also saw a captured DT-30 in service. These are actually used by the Russian army for Arctic operations in I believe, the Northern Command Zone in Siberia. There are very few of these. There's something around, I believe, 30 of them, and we've seen a couple of them get destroyed. Now we've seen, although I've never seen this documented before, one of these was captured and is now being used by Ukrainian armed forces somewhere on the front lines. A very rare vehicle, not incredibly expensive, but rare nonetheless, and really interesting to see that the Ukrainians were able to take a trophy version of the DT-30. We're now moving on to our last bit of location unknown news, where we could see a very interesting Frankenstein vehicle being made by the Ukrainians that put a BTR-60 and a BMD-2 turret together. It has the 30mm 2A42 gun in the BMD-2's turret, which makes it very similar in firepower to a BMP-2, and of course based on the BTR-60 chassis, or the hull, more like. A very bizarre vehicle, and this is the only kind that we know of in existence, and hopefully we see it in action sometime around, because it would be very interesting to see if this thing would stack up to the BTR-4, considering the kind of firepower that it will have with its 30mm gun. We're now going to be moving on from the location unknowns and back into the frontline news, skipping past the Northeast since we already covered it, and moving on down into the area of Sebryanka and Bila-Orivka, where we saw a little bit of a legend in action. The Maxim. A load of Maxims. Like, nothing but Maxims. There's 3 Maxims we can see on film. These are being used by the Ukrainian army as well. And some people may be like, hey, what the hell? You know, I thought the Russians were the ones who were backers. Why in the world are the Ukrainians using Maxim guns? The reason why the Ukrainians are using Maxim guns is because... And I'll actually have to give credit to the Maxim gun here, because while it's incredibly old and entered service in its first military in the world in 1881, which makes it a very old gun, these things do stand up even today in a defensive position. Water-cooled machine guns are actually the most efficient in the world in terms of the overheating of the barrel. In fact, A Vickers machine gun back in the 1960s was fired at a British armory and fired 6 million rounds continuously. It only stopped to quickly reload the belts and also to switch out barrels whenever needed. But that thing fired 6 million rounds, and when they took the gun apart, rather than having to replace a few barrels, the insides of the machine gun were immaculate. It's almost been like it had hardly fired any rounds at all. These things are not that bad. The Vickers gun, of course, is just a modified version of the Maxim gun. And these things used in defensive positions can lay down almost an unlimited amount of fire for an unlimited amount of time as long as the ammunition is available to these machine guns. So a very interesting thing to see, the Ukrainians moving these around. And also they have the entire, cart modification on them. And I gotta say, really interesting. And so with that, that's the end of the clip, but very cool to see. We're now going to be moving on down from the area of Serebryonka and Bilorivka, and further on down towards the area of Bakhmut. And Bakhmut has had a little bit less of video footage coming out today, but we have seen some major frontline shifts inside of the city itself. And so starting off with our first bit of news to the most northern end of the Bakhmut front near Vesely, we heard a HIMARS hitting the front lines. This was apparently filmed by a Russian. Actually, no, by a Ukrainian, and we heard the rockets hitting the Russian position in the distance. I saw the Ukrainian flag there right at the last moment, so sorry about that. But here's the sound of a HIMARS barrage.
Выходы, блядь. Наши хаймарсы бежат.
And this is at a distance, so it's not right up on the vehicle. And you can hear that almost right after launch, these things are making the whoosh and the crack that they've already gone supersonic, giving you the idea of how fast these things are going in their flight. Most Soviet-era MLRSs fire their rockets subsonic. The HIMARS actually is able, with the right kind of munitions, to be able to fire their missiles at supersonic speeds almost right out of the launching tube. So very wild to actually hear that here, that these missiles are going supersonic almost instantly. We're now going to be moving on from this clip and further on down the line into the Solidar area, where we saw some D-30 artillery pieces being destroyed somewhere in the Solidar city area. And of course we're going to have to mute it because that music may be bussing, but the copyright is also not bussing. We can see the area of the outskirts of Soledar more towards the western side, and we can see the D-30 battery. Oh, one second. We can see the D-30 battery, and I believe it's right there in the center of the screen. We can now see the artillery landing on top of the D-30 and immediately hitting it, most likely destroying the artillery piece and also setting its ammunition on fire. And we see right there, another D-30 destroyed. That's the end of the clip, and a good thing to see. We're now moving on into our next clip from the Bakhmut area, somewhere near the front lines, where we saw the Ukrainians using a Carl Gustav recoilless rifle. These recoilless rifles have been around for a long time at this point in the war, but they've proven their worth as a frontline artillery piece.
Пострел!
That's the sound of tinnitus.
My ears.
Dude, like that right there. Did you hear that thing fire?
Новую игрушечку такую. Пострел!
Oh, dinner time already. It's like trying.
That's like that video game sound they put in like Call of Duty to like imitate like the sound that comes off a grenade after your like ears get stung from it.
Yeah, you know, that's. I think that is tinnitus. But yeah, it sounds a lot like it. It sounds exactly like it, really. And that's bizarre to hear that in real life. I've never actually heard a Carl Gustav ring like that in a video. We've heard SPG-9s do that, but we haven't heard the Carl Gustav do that. And I guess you could say the Carl Gustav has a good name. I guess it has a ring to it. Anyways, we're moving on from that little clip and on into the next one, further on down and into the city. And now it's time for us to start explaining what's been going on the front lines here over the past 48 hours. So, here is the past 48 hours. And as you can see, overall flanking maneuvers on the battlefield have been very limited. We've only seen one up here, and it appears to have done almost nothing over 24 hours. Maybe taken a small wooded area, but nothing more than that. However, in the city of Bakhmut, we have seen some fairly large advances occurring. It appears that no man's land is starting to get thinned down again as Russian forces have been able to move from the south and north, capturing this area and then finally allowing Russian forces to pour in from the western side, well, the eastern side of the city on over towards the west, which now means that the Ukrainians are having to deal with the bulk of Russian forces inside the city, and there are really no more natural barriers to stop the Russians from attacking them head on. So we can see that the front lines made a massive movement today once Russian reinforcements were able to move from the eastern side of the city, which means that the battle for Bakhmut, at least in terms of the firefights and the intensity inside of the city itself, are most likely going to be ramping up to proportions that we have not seen for a good while. At least since the start of the Battle of Bakhmut over here on the eastern end. Ukrainian and Russian units will almost be facing themselves with their full weights being levied on the front lines. No more will we be talking about an advance coming from the south, and this is where the majority of the Russian push will come. The Russian push can come in the city at this point from anywhere. It could come from the south, it could come from the east, it could also come from the north as well, down onto the Ukrainian defenders. So we'll be having to see what is going on here. Of course, the Ukrainians are still holding their confirmed defensive lines. Of course, while the Russians have been able to move forward through no man's land, we've seen that the Ukrainian defenses appear to be setting up along the railroad line going through the center of the town, meaning that there will be an open field, probably about 200 yards long, that the Russians will have to advance through or fire at the Ukrainians from before they can advance across. So it seems as though this may be one of the few natural barriers or artificial barriers left in the city that the Ukrainians will most likely be able to defend from effectively. But it appears that the Battle of Bakhmut is getting into an incredibly risky and dangerous phase for sure. We're now going to be moving on into the video clips themselves, and starting off in the center of Bakhmut, where we saw the Russian flag flying over the city center. But unlike the bit that we saw a while ago, we saw that Prigozhin wasn't able to put the flag on the administrative building's roof because the building doesn't even exist anymore. It's been reduced to rubble, and we can see a Russian flag flying down there in the rubble, right there. And we can also see the Wagner flag right alongside that one. So it appears that the Wagner group has finally been able to secure that victory over the rubble pile that they've always wanted. But it's not a victory for long. Of course, the Ukrainians still control 27% of the town, and the Russians still have to push them out of it to actually achieve control over the entire city. And we don't know when that'll happen. It seems that it will almost be inevitable at this point that the Russians will take Bakhmut, but the victory is not even a bittersweet one. It wasn't even worthwhile. The Russians have lost tens of thousands of men killed and who knows how many wounded trying to take this city. They've wasted hundreds of tanks, over hundreds, maybe even 1,000 APCs completely destroyed. So we know that for sure this victory is not even a Pyrrhic one. It may as well be a defeat for the Russians, but at least they can smile for the cameras and say that they took one more town. Insignificant one at that. We're now going to be moving behind the lines in Bakhmut, where we saw a T-64BM Bulat behind the lines in the city, helping to support. Of course, even in the areas of Bakhmut itself, the Rasputitsa has mired the roads with nothing but mud and sludge. Very difficult for infantry to move quickly across, meaning that even the Russians will be bogged down in their attacks on the Ukrainians, as they'll have to move through this stuff in the middle of the city, and the tanks will as well. We can see the crew standing on top of it. We can also see a couple of other Ukrainian vehicles, other Bulats in the area, and it appears that this may be a staging area for Ukrainian main battle tanks to move back into the city and continue to conduct the defensive. Of course, we know that the Ukrainians and also the Russians are not using an excessively high amount of armor within the city itself. Most of the armor activity is happening to the outskirts, to the north and the south, but we can see that the Ukrainians do have some tanks in the city to provide support whenever needed. We're now going to be moving out of the city and on into the southern flank itself, where we also saw the 5th Brigade hitting the Russians as they try to advance through a somewhat open but very broken area. It appeared that there was a trench line over here, but beyond that, there's nothing more than a completely reduced tree line that's been destroyed to nothing, and then a trench over here to the right. When you see a Ukrainian tank moving onto the position and getting itself ready to fire off a couple of shots. We can see the first one land near the front of the trench. It appears that it's missed. And we can now see the tank moving up again to fire another shot. We can see that all of them are hitting right on the berm of the trench. That one actually went in. And interestingly enough, we also saw that a Russian didn't dig the trench by the manual. He actually dug it in a zigzag. We now see some, maybe a Ukrainian, nope, that's not a Ukrainian assault squad for sure. We can see a YPR 65 or a Martyr. I think that might be, hang on. I gotta go look at a Martyr 1 now, because that may be our first instance of a Martyr 1 in use on the front lines. So let me go look at the rear of a Martyr. Nope, it's not a Martyr. It looks like a YPR 765 instead. And so it's firing off its turret. I've got to be completely honest with y'all. I have no idea what APC that really is, because I'm trying to look at it. It has some kind of an autocannon turret, but it appears to be unmanned. It's also offset a little bit to the side, and there's this large open swinging back door. Of course, most APCs and IFVs have those, but I can't really tell you what kind that is. We're not really getting that good of a look at it. We can also see them firing AT weapon into the trench. We see the Russians still retreating further down the trench as the APC continues to fire, and the Ukrainian infantry also fire their their RPG from the back of the APC. We can now see them loading back in. Someone said it's a Spartan. It may be a Spartan. And we can now see that the trench was thoroughly cleared, and many Russians are taking nice naps. With that, that's the end of the video, but a very interesting one to see that as the Russians try to advance somewhere in the southern area, most likely towards Ivaniske, to cut off the supply lines heading into Bakhmut, the Ukrainians move forward the 5th Brigade to take them on out, and it appears that they were fairly successful. We're now moving on down into the area of Kurdimivka, somewhere near the canal region, where we saw a Grad barrage hitting a Ukrainian position. We can see the Ukrainian cameraman looking over into the distance, where you see smoke rising off the hill, showing that a grab barrage may have already happened. We can now hear some more of the rockets flying in and hitting the area. We can see them actually coming in right there. And the barrage, as quick as it started, is almost over. But we can hear a second barrage now coming in closer to the cameraman, and then a third barrage further over to the left. It appears that an entire Grad battery of at least 3 to 4 MLRSs is firing on this hillside. It sounds as though we can still hear Grads coming in. This may be the 4th Grad firing at the area. We now see the cameraman looking at the hillside again with small fires being started by the rockets. And showing the kind of firepower that an MLRS battery can bring against the Ukrainians. Of course, this still does not uproot the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are usually well entrenched, and these barrages just, I guess you could say, maybe put them a little bit off ease, but still, Ukrainian soldiers are incredibly brave and continue to hold their lines even in the face of withering barrages like these.
Де розвезло тут все.
You now see the cameraman walking through a destroyed village here. Once again, looking over in the distance, we can see that the fires are starting to spread from the rockets. And we can hear another Grad barrage coming in. And that's the end of the clip, but giving you a little bit of a look at the kind of firepower, once again, the Russians are levying against a lot of the front lines. And even through a barrage like this, with Ukrainian soldiers in the middle of it, they still hold the line. It's unbelievable to really think about that, but these Ukrainian soldiers have balls of steel. We're now going to be moving on from this clip and the Bakhmut area at large, and we're now going to be moving a little bit further down the lines. But before we do, we're going to hop behind the lines to day 404, where we saw that an informant was captured by the Ukrainian SBU. According to the caption, this woman here, whose face is not being taken a picture of, they've turned her around away from the camera, she was marking coordinates for Russian missiles at hospitals and dormitories in the city of Kramatorsk. And this is according to the SSU. They found her and have now arrested her, and she'll most likely be awaiting trial for the crimes that she's been alleged to commit. We're now going to be moving on from the city of Kramatorsk and moving on from a collaborator, and now further on down the lines and into the area of Donetsk, where we saw some trenches that have fallen victim to the melting of the snow and the Rasputitsa itself, and it is terrible. It's turned into a swimming pool.
Вот так вот. Да я не могу ногу вытащить, я медленно буду.
You hear him wading down the trench. You see that it was taking him a lot of effort because you could see his arm was swung out wide, like he was having to pull his foot out of the mud, out of the water, and then try and press forward. And I've got to tell you, these Rasputitsas are horrendous. I couldn't stand living in something like this, or a place where it gets this muddy. I feel like I'd be driven crazy by the mud alone, but you got to give a lot of credit to the Ukrainian soldiers, again, who are still sticking this thing through and trudging through the conditions, even as bad as they are. We're now going to be moving on from that clip and even further on down the line. Of course, no news coming from Donetsk today, and no large frontline advances from either side, and on down into the Volodar area, where we saw that, while a lot of people have been saying this, we never reported on this, a lot of people have been saying that Magyar is dead. Believe it or not, there was actually a video put out there of a guy who looked like Magyar, who was covered in mud and sitting in a trench being shaken by another Ukrainian soldier, and it looked like he was dead. Well, his death and the reports of his death were greatly over-exaggerated because it appears that he's alive, and he gave a little video update today. Now, of course, there are no subtitles, so we do not know what was specifically said, but he is alive, and this is proof of it.
Мадяр на зв'язку. Ходіть, вам щось покажу. Як вам ракурс?
Well, you see the car antennas back at it again,
Yeah.
and that confirms that Magyar is A-OK.
What are we looking at?
It looks like we're looking at some kind of a football stadium. It's the... Oh, I know where this is.
Oh.
Let me go look at it real quick. It is the stadium inside of Donetsk City, the Donbass Arena right here.
Oh, okay. I couldn't figure out what that was for a minute.
Yeah, I was looking at that and I was like, what the hell? Because from what we understand, he was actually moved to the Volodar area for a while, but now it looks like he's once again conducting some kind of a drone operation in the Donetsk region. So it looks like he maybe even moved up from Volodar and towards Avdiivka, perhaps.
Донецьк, котрий рік захоплений загарбниками. Але загарбник мусить пам'ятати, що ми дуже, дуже близько. І бачимо, як не все то практично. Все.
And we now see him going to the next video clip showing some road traffic inside of the city of Donetsk and showing, even on a side note, rather than Magyar just still being alive, that nobody working in the Russian military, the DPR military, or the LPR military is safe even in places they think they are, because a lot of Russian soldiers have actually met their end here in the city of Donetsk from drone bomblet attacks, and it looks like they still could. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip of news and further on down the line, out of the southern front, and on into the area of Kherson, where we actually saw those mine-clearing little vehicles that we saw a while ago back in action again. And we actually got to take a picture at what they do. Apparently they use this large tiller-looking thing in front of them. It spins at a really high speed, and they literally just dig up the ground at surface level, and if it hits anything, it will explode inside of the, I guess you could say, the flail, I guess is the best way to say it. And we could see the paths that it takes. So this thing will be tilling the fields at the exact same time it's demining, so that means that the Ukrainian farmers in this area will not have to do the extra effort of tilling the ground. They'll just have to plant the seeds, and also they won't have to worry about the mines as well. But there is a good picture of the vehicle, and actually, believe it or not, it is actually a flail. I thought it was large blades, but you can see the chains there attached to it, which means it is a flail, much like the ones you would have seen a M4 Sherman flail use in the First World War, right here, a mine flail. You can see it right there. Same chains and everything, almost the same theory, and I think we could probably find a picture Like, for example, this Matilda right here that is using a flail of its own. You can see a giant engine attached to the side to spin the flail at the highest speed possible. Let me see if I can find another one. We can actually see a purpose-built flail vehicle right there. It looks like it's made of Matilda again. And we can see, let me find this here. Here we go, a Sherman flail. That's the one you saw in the picture. And this little remote vehicle right here operates with the same principle, but the flail has a shield around it, most likely to protect from flying shrapnel once the thing explodes. But once again, operating off of the same principle that was being used nearly 80 years ago in the Second World War, just heavily modernized. And so with that, very cool to see. Very great to know that the Ukrainians are going through massive efforts to try and make sure that Ukrainians behind the lines are as safe as possible when going about their daily lives, like farming and also just commuting from place to place. And with that, we've actually covered all of the Ukraine war news from north to south, east to west. Every single bit has been covered that we can. And so, without further ado, it's time for me to go to the President of Ukraine's website and pull up the speech from the one, the only, President Volodymyr Zelensky. And so, without further ado, here is the clip.
Дається слово його високоповажності пану президенту України, пану Володимиру Зеленському.
Дуже дякую.
One second, y'all. It's in Ukrainian. Let me go through and try and see if I can get it in English. To English, please. Yeah, there we go. All right, so here's the speech.
Пане голово Сенату, пане голово Палати депутатів, вдячний вам за ваші слова, за таке добре привітання. Я бачу наш прапор у вас. Дякую вам за повагу до нашого прапора, до нашого гімну, до моєї держави. Пані та панове, шановні члени Національного конгресу Чилі, шановні представники і представниці дипломатичного корпусу, шановні журналісти, чилійські народи. Дозвольте мені розпочати моє звернення з однієї історії. З історії про місце, в якому діти малювали. Звичайні діти, але незвичайні малюнки на стінах у школі, у підвалі. У селі Ягідному у нашій Чернігівській області, де російські солдати перетворили звичайну сільську школу на концентраційний табір. Вони зігнали туди усіх мешканців села, усіх, у підвал, дітей і дорослих, зовсім літніх людей, жінок і чоловіків. Менше 200 квадратних метрів на більш ніж 360 людей. Можливо, ви ще не чули про це місце, але я хочу вам розказати про нього. Розказати про стіни цього підвалу у Ягідному, на яких діти малювали те, що малюють будь-які діти в будь-якій країні. Друзів, рідних, своє життя, свої мрії, футболістів, інших своїх героїв. Діти намагались писати рядки нашого гімну, який тільки що тут у вас звучав. Рядки гімну на стінах. А дорослі вели підрахунок теж на стінах, скільки днів минуло у тому підвалі і скільки людей загинули, не витримавши таких умов. Їхні прізвища й досі на стінах. Я вчора був там, я все це бачив. Від 3 до 30 березня минулого року проіснував концтабір у Ягідному. На початку людей ще випускали на вулицю по одному, інколи хоча б в туалет. А потім і цього їх позбавили, жодної хвилини сонця і неба. Темрява підвалу, тиснява, пил і відро замість туалету. І ми точно знаємо про 10 загиблих, там люди просто не витримували. Знаємо і про тих, кого розстріляли потім в селі, хто зник безвісті. І я не хочу говорити публічно зараз про те, що окупанти стали робити, коли люди сказали, що загиблих треба поховати. Це було пекло на землі. Пекло, яке прийшло в Україну із російської армії. Можливо, десь на вашому континенті, ще в якихось країнах ще залишились позитивні чи ностальгічні спогади про період відносин із Радянським Союзом чи про ту Росію, якою вона прикидалася після 91-го року. Але зараз ось цей концтабір Ягідному характеризує, із ким ми маємо справу. І для чого було потрібне таке знущання з людей? Що може бути мотивом, щоб тримати 3 тижні все село в нелюдських умовах в підвалі? Це фашизм 21-го століття. Він так діє. Це диктатура. Вона таке робить. І коли ми звертаємось до партнерів по зброю, ми звертаємось виключно по захист. І майже 1900 українських міст і сіл нашим воїнам вдалося звільнити від російської окупації. Ягідне серед них. Багато сіл, містечок, міст пройшли через ще гірші знущання. Вони просто спалені. Уявіть, колись міцне село, приміром, Посад Покровське в Херсонській області України, в якому жили понад 2000 людей, а тепер майже всі будинки розбиті. Якщо бути точним, 96% пошкоджень обстрілами. Ось це прийшла Росія. Уявіть, коли в одній тільки області ще 50 таких майже повністю розбитих війною сіл. Уявіть, місто, яке десятиліттями славилось своєю промисловістю, своїм морським портом, а зараз місто мертве, убито Росією. Це наш Маріуполь. Уявіть одну з найбільших українських цінностей, одну з найбільших людських цінностей – родючі поля, які століттями забезпечували добробут наш на півдні нашої країни, на сході також. Поля, які зараз забруднені російськими мінами. Не рідкість російські ракети, що не розірвались від систем залпового вогню, стирчать у цій землі, нагадуючи про те, що у агресії однієї держави проти іншої не може бути жодного виправдання. Пані та панове, чилійський народе, ще майже 1900 українських міст і сіл ми повинні звільнити від російського зла. Саме для цього ми створили коаліцію країн, що допомагають Україні боронити нашу національну незалежність і життя наших людей. Саме для цього я запропонував ще минулої осені формулу миру, 10 пунктів, які здатні повернути Україні безпеку, а усій Європі, всьому світу стабільність, порушену російським фашизмом. Саме для цього ми звертаємось по підтримку до вас, до чилійського народу. Життя всюди має однакову цінність, найвищу цінність. Немає нічого, що могло би виправдати знищення життя мирних людей, приниження мирних людей, підкорення вільних народів та розбійні напади на інші держави заради прибутку. Я вдячний вам, Республіка Чилі, за принципове засудження російської агресії, за підтримку відповідних резолюцій Генасамблеї ООН. Я вдячний пану президенту Чилі, пану Боричу за досягнуті дуже важливі домовленості про участь вашої держави у гуманітарному розмінуванні нашої держави, нашої землі. Це те, чого потребують 174 тисячі квадратних кілометрів нашої території, що забруднені російськими мінами. Ми формуємо глобальну коаліцію, щоб виконати це та інші подібні завдання. Я впевнений, що ми їх виконаємо. Всюди у світі не може бути нормою спалення міст і сіл. Не можуть бути нормою катівні, якими хтось хоче тримати в покорі людей. Не можуть бути нормою концентраційні чи фільтраційні табори, куди зганяють людей і де люди гинуть. Не можуть бути нормами такі війни, яку зараз веде Росія проти України. А отже, і сама Росія, якою вона стала, не може і не буде нормою. Це держава-фашист, держава-терорист, держава-зло. Держава, що заслуговує на законне, справедливе ставлення світу, ставлення як до злочинців. Чилійські народи, Україна запрошує вас приєднатися до наших миротворчих зусиль. Ваш голос в ООН на підтримку відновлення безпеки і територіальної цілісності України завжди дуже важливий. Ваша участь в реалізації пунктів нашої формули миру, а це може бути не лише гуманітарне розмінування, точно додасть сили міжнародному порядку, заснованому на правилах. Я запрошую вас підтримати наші зусилля для продовольчої безпеки світу. Це те, що залежить від спільних дій всіх країн. Через те, що гігантські площі нашої землі забруднені мінами чи перебувають в зоні обстрілів. Через те, що Росія блокує наші порти і морські перевезення в Чорному морі. Ринок продовольства дестабілізований. Частину постачання нам вдалося розблокувати, але світ потребує більшого. Просто щоб обсяги на ринку і ціни на їжу на всіх континентах були стабільними. Ви можете бути лідером стабілізаційних зусиль від вашого континенту. Будь ласка, підтримайте зусилля Міжнародного кримінального суду, який нещодавно видав ордер на арешт російського диктатора у справі щодо насильницької депортації українських дітей в Росію і спроби знищення їхньої ідентичності через асиміляцію та незаконне усиновлення при живих рідних. Немає такого злочину, який би ще не скоїла Росія, ведучи цю війну. Немає такого народу, який міг би залишитись байдужим чи нейтральним до такого зла. Бо ми всі люди. Ми всі хочемо, щоб діти наших народів були щасливі, у безпеці, вчилися і раділи життю, а не малювали на стінах у неволі, у підвалах і таборах. Я дякую вам за увагу, дякую вам за підтримку. Хай диктатура завжди програє, а життя завжди перемагає. Дякую. Слава Україні!
And so with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And that wraps up our day 404 and 405 night of news. I thank you all so much once again for watching this stream. It means a lot to us that so many people find this stream to be a credible source of news that they can rely on each and every day, 6 days a week, of course, except for Mondays. If y'all did enjoy, make sure to hit the like button. Also, make sure to subscribe, because that helps this channel to keep on running and helps the Lee Spring Army to spread across the entirety of the internet. And of course, make sure to deliver the news and keep running the killer fundraisers like the one we just ran on Sunday. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. I hope y'all of course enjoyed the news again, and with that, we're going to be moving into the polls and then the question segment. We're going to address all the super chats that we have and then get into the live chats. Of course, want to make it clear to everyone that you do not have to super chat to have a question answered. You can throw in a live chat. You can put @EnforcerMatt with no space in the name before your message and then type your question, and Matthew will collect it from the chat and then put it into the spreadsheet, where we'll eventually get around to answering it, hopefully. But of course, we can never make any guarantees that we can get to all of them, because there are usually a pretty large amount of them. Super chats, once again to explain, are really to support the channel, because we do not get supported any other way, ads or anything, unless it is a super chat. Super chats are the only way we can keep the thing running. And of course, if you do enjoy, you get to decide if you want to support us and how much you want to. And of course, I want to make sure there is no pressure at all. And we always want to make sure that folks can get on here and watch this news absolutely free, unless they want to support us. And so with that, let's get on into the polls.
All right, and of course, we have many polls to address. We have 4 of them to be precise. But Enforcer, real quick, I had a question because I was curious. The audience on that speech, first of all, Zelensky, of course, did a great job. But where was that where he was giving the speech?
I don't really know where that was. I'll pull it up again because I'm sure there's a description. Let's see.
Because they seemed completely, like, uninterested. Like, I'm just curious where it was.
The National Congress of Chile.
Oh, that's ironic, isn't it?
Pecan.
Pecan.
I mean, they were kind of disinterested. But, you know, maybe that's just the way people in Chile act. I don't know. But anyways,
Yeah, I was curious. But anyways, with that being said, we're on to our first poll, which says Japan has begun to purchase Russian oil above price cap and breaks agreement with the West. And what are your thoughts? 44% said not good. Japan is reliant on Russia. 13% said unsure. 27% said not good. Japan has abandoned the West. And 15% said that's fine and it's Japan's call. And on this one, to me, it highlighted how some nations overseas are very reliant on Russia for oil. And I really strongly doubt that Japan wanted to go and buy the oil from them, especially above the price cap that we had agreed upon that they would not do. So sadly, they've had to break that. But I won't say that Japan has abandoned the West. I don't think that's the intent behind it, but it is bad nonetheless. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say the Japanese are in a little bit of a special situation. The Japanese have always been short on oil. That's what actually led them into the Second World War. And so if they are not able to find oil, their entire nation will start to crumble. And so they're probably just trying to purchase the oil from anyone at this point because they may be in some fairly tough straits. And they're also buying it above market average because there really isn't any other option for them right now. So with that, I hope that does address the poll fairly well. Of course, one always has to understand that countries cannot always sit there and decide to do things that would be in our interest, like Japan. Sometimes it gets a little tough and they have to tap out. Otherwise, they would probably stick with it. So with that, I hope that does address that. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the second poll we have says reports indicate that the Chinese yuan has replaced the US dollar in Russia, and what are your thoughts? 36% said not good. China will now control Russia. 32% said that's good. We need to disconnect the West from Russia. 22% said I'm indifferent, and 10% said unsure. And once again, China is trying to gain some control over Russia, and they're probably going to be successful in doing that because Russia is in a tough financial spot right now. And with the yuan becoming the most commonly traded currency in Russia, that is just proof of that actually happening in real time. So I'm with the 36%, but Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they're most likely conducting that economic shift where they go from being a kind of, they weren't really pro-US or pro-Western ever, but of course, the US dollar was a great trading medium. But now they're starting to switch over to the yuan because, there's only one good economic option for them at this point, and it's China. So they're probably just doing that to try and align themselves within the Chinese market a little bit better, and that in turn will, of course, lead them to most likely get very heavily involved in having an alliance with China instead of just kind of being indifferent or openly unfriendly to Western countries and then trading off of the dollar. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one says Maxar images show that Russia has vastly expanded its Crimean coast trench network. And what are your thoughts? And if y'all recall a while back, when we were looking at some pictures, we saw that the Russians were building themselves a nice little trench network along the, I believe, Sevastopol coast. And apparently they have greatly expanded upon that. So 48% said Russia is preparing for Ukraine. 28% said Russia is preparing for NATO. 16% said it's a mixture, and 8% said unsure. And I think we went over this a while back as well. I think that Russia might be preparing to defend against NATO. I'm not sure how realistic it is that NATO is actually going to go and do anything to Crimea, but for whatever reason, Russia feels the need to put that there. I really doubt it's for Ukraine. But Enforcer, what say you?
It's certainly not for Ukraine. I will definitely back you up on that one because there's no way in hell the Ukrainians have any kind of navy that could support a landing force to attack there. So practically pointless as far as Ukraine and Russia is concerned in this war. An attack from Ukraine would come over land. For the West, however, that's more so directed at them. We are the only nation in the world, and the British and the French also follow up with that nowadays, that would be able to launch some kind of an amphibious invasion. We're really the only country that could launch a large naval invasion. The British could probably launch a smaller one, much like we saw during the Falklands War, even at this point. And the French could probably launch an amphibious invasion as well, although it wouldn't be... it would probably be on par with the British in size, the landing force they'd be able to field and supply. The US, however, is really the only country in the world that can supply a sizable landing force. Of course, there are let me make sure I get this correct. There are some kind of amphibious landing carriers like LHDs. LHD, aircraft carrier. These right here, the amphibious assault ships. And I actually got it right. It's a landing helicopter dock. Okay, I didn't get that part right. It is an LHD nonetheless. But these right here are most likely what would be used beyond the supercarriers to actually support a naval invasion. So we have a pretty decent amount of these, as I understand. I believe that 7 of these are active as of right now. How many Nimitz class do we have? Nimitz class. And then let's go look at the Gerald R. Fords. So there are 10 Nimitz class carriers that are still active. Wait a minute. Hang on. I was just thinking about that, Matthew. Wasn't there another class of... Oh! Now it makes sense. Dude, I always swore... And I'm going to sound really dumb to naval people for this. I always swore the Enterprise class and the Nimitz class were the same. Like this one right here. The USS Enterprise.
The Enterprise is the flagship, isn't it?
The Enterprise was the flagship. It was actually decommissioned, I believe, in 2012 and already scrapped. It appears that all of these, only one of them was completed. The USS Enterprise was the only one of its class to exist. It was the flagship of one of our fleets for a good while, and then when it was decommissioned, I believe, apparently it was still sitting in a shipyard, most likely the one in Newport News, where it was built, until 2017, and then it was scrapped. I didn't actually know that. That's something new to me. I thought it was actually a Nimitz class, but we still have 10 Nimitz class carriers. We have how many Gerald R. Fords? Let's see, Gerald R. Ford carrier. And let's see how many we have. We have 1 completed. We have 2 that are being constructed and another one on order, but there's only 1 that's active right now, and that is the Gerald R. Ford. There's the picture of it right there. I've got to be honest with y'all, just an aesthetic aside on these carriers. I really like the old conning towers of the Nimitz class carriers right here, instead of the smaller, more slender Gerald R. Ford one. For some reason, it just looks odd, especially for the size of the carrier, but that's more of an aesthetic.
The deck's too big to have such a small tower on it. Like, you need to make it at least triple the length of that one.
But then again, it is clearing up room on the flight deck, so I guess another aircraft or 2 can be operated on the deck. But man, these things are huge. Like, look at those people on that thing. These things are massive. I mean, like, they dwarf anything at this point. Like, what is the length of one of these things, really? 1,092 feet long. That's a big ship. That thing's massive. Oh, I was waiting. I was waiting for Matthew to respond. I was like, yeah, I guess he's not. But anyways, we have 1 of these. We have 10 Nimitz class. We have 11 supercarriers, and then on top of that, we have the additional 7 LHDs of the Wasp class alone. And then we also have the American class LHDs as well, which we have 2 of those, and we're building another. We're building another one of them, and we have 11 more planned. So in total, we have. Let me make sure I get the number correct. We have 9 LHDs, and we have 11 supercarriers. And of course, all of these can field either support for a ground invasion with the aircraft firing off multiple kinds of ordnance to destroy surface-to-air missile systems, coastal defense networks, things like that. And then the LHDs follow up by helping with the actual landing on the shore. And then you have the rest of the U.S. Navy to help out as well, the frigates, the destroyers, the cruisers, and so on. The U.S. Navy is truly a monster, and to prepare to fight this monster, you have to build some massive coastal defenses, and that's what we're somewhat seeing in Sevastopol right now, just with the trench works alone. But those trench works, compared to what the U.S. Navy can levy against a coastal force in a naval invasion, is never those fortifications, even as best as they can get, without the kind of technology to really fight the U.S. Navy, there's nothing they're really going to do rather than get blown away, most likely from dozens of miles off, by missile cruisers, destroyers, and the aircraft from the aircraft carriers. So with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well. And everyone's saying that the USS JFK, which is the next Gerald R. Ford class, will be commissioned by next year. So we'll actually have 2 of these instead of just the 1.
Interesting.
And one more thing before we move on, though. The Gerald R. Ford, and I want to put this into perspective because this is one thing that a lot of people don't ever look at. The Queen Elizabeth class, and this is once again just to talk about the aircraft carriers because the Queen Elizabeth class, rip the Queen, but let's see here, the Queen Elizabeth class. Here we go. Let me go down here, and you can see right here that the Queen Elizabeth class can carry 40 aircraft. The Kuznetsov carrier can carry, not now, it can carry, let me make sure, carry 18 plus 6. So that is 24. I got it right. It's 24 aircraft versus the British 40 aircraft per aircraft carrier, and then compared to the Gerald R4 class, which can carry up to and a little over 75 aircraft, giving you a little bit of an idea of how powerful an American supercarrier really is. It even beats out the British Queen Elizabeth class, which was one of the most modern and largest aircraft carriers in the world right now, by almost twice the amount of aircraft it can carry. These things are truly impressive, and a lot of people never put that into weight when they talk about the U.S. Navy going up against someone else. One of these Gerald R4 class carriers is the equivalent to almost 2 or 3 entire air bases worth of aircraft on a single ship at sea, with all of the ordnance to go with it. But with that, we're going to be moving on to the next poll because I have been harping on the U.S. Navy too much and what the Russians would be in for, because those coastal defenses certainly aren't meant for Ukraine, they're meant for us. And so with that, well, really the West in general, but, you know, the Americans would be the one pulling the amphibious landing off, and then the ground force was most likely be a coalition of everyone. But anyways, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our fourth poll says a report alleges that 3 Ukrainian news channels were apparently shut down today with no reason given, and what are your thoughts? And before I go over the options, I just want to say that I received this information from the Kyiv Post, and I've been following them for a few months, and I haven't seen them publish anything false as of yet, but I will have to admit I wasn't able to corroborate it with any other sources, so kind of interesting, and take it with a grain of salt. It looks like 29% said good, Ukraine likely has a reason, 23% said did it actually happen, 22% said unsure, and 26% said not good, and why was this done? And my first option that I'm going to pick is probably going to be, did it actually happen? Because typically I like to see multiple sources report the same thing before I take it as fact. So right now I'm going to take it with a grain of salt. But if it is legitimate, I would say that I would like to know what the reason would be for that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's interesting to hear. Once again, we have never had that corroborated from anywhere rather than the Kyiv Post, which is different than the Kyiv Independent. They're both similarly named, but the Kyiv Independent is different than the Kyiv Post. We haven't seen that anywhere else, but if the information is true, it is interesting here. Nevertheless, they haven't been completely shut down because, as far as we understand it, they are still streaming internationally their news network.
Yes, they're still streaming internationally for now, but I think what the Kyiv Post meant by their headline was that it's been shut off from broadcasting inside Ukraine's borders.
And that would be interesting. I believe, considering that they're not completely shut down, that isn't the Ukrainians cracking down on the news networks because they disagree with them or anything. Otherwise, they wouldn't allow them to continue to broadcast internationally. So it may be that the last time a counteroffensive began, they spilled a little bit too much information that they shouldn't have, and so this time they've decided to just shut them down completely during the build-up process, at least within Ukraine, so that way any Russians who somehow are able to pick up the show inside of Ukraine can't watch it. But then again, that still doesn't make sense because they could just pick up on the international broadcast that they'd most likely be able to get from Estonia or Finland or elsewhere. So I don't really know what would be the reason behind that. That is pretty strange, I would say. But then again, we've only gotten corroboration from the Kyiv Post on that. We haven't really seen it anywhere else. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we're moving into our super chat questions because we are out of polls. We went through 4 of them that quickly. But anyways, moving on to our super chats, we have a $100 donation from none other than Mark, Slav Ukraine, the channel legend. And he says, Bada boom, jaga jaga.
Bada boom, jaga jaga, Igor! And thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, bada boom! And Mark, I don't know how you do it, but I thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping the thing to keep on rolling, because you folks make this thing possible. Not a single ad has ever been run on this stream. And I'll say this though, there's a footnote there. There has been ads run on these streams, but it's whenever we get copyrighted, which is why we always mute music, because we don't want them to get copyrighted where people have to watch ads. Because 1, it's annoying, and 2, the war in Ukraine should be as easily accessible to folks who want to know about it as possible. So there should be no ads. There should be nothing getting in the way of immediately clicking on the stream and getting right into the news. So I got to thank you so much once again, Mark, for helping us to keep that possible for so long. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And also, bada boom again, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Yes, and luckily, Madar is still alive, because I did see that news earlier today from a couple of different sources, apparently Russian disinformation saying that he was deceased, but I was very relieved to find out that he is still fine and he is still kicking and still jumping around with that car antenna. But anyways, up next, we have a $21 super chat from Aquatico50, who says, I visited the USS Lexington in Corpus Christi, Texas. It was nicknamed the Blue Ghost by the Japanese because they swore they sunk it 4 times, but kept reappearing. It was decommissioned in 1991, but looks better than the Kuznetsov.
USS Lexington, and I think I've seen something of it before. And let me go here. We'll look at the photos of it. Actually, no, that's weird. We're gonna go to the Google map for it and then look at the photos. So where in the world is this? This is in North Beach in Corpus Christi in the bay. That's so weird. But then again, it must have come in through here. But that is so weird, like, to see a ship this size in a bay. Anyways, let's look at it. So it looks like, let's see here. Let's go up to the flight deck and take a look. So it appears that it's got concrete on it. So it seems as though it may still be representing the refit version from after the war. Because I believe it had a wooden deck during the war that was non-reinforced, which was a little bit of a problem for American aircraft carriers, is that they were very susceptible to kamikaze attacks, which may be the reason why the Japanese thought they sank the USS Lexington 4 times over, is that usually a U.S. aircraft carrier could get damaged beyond repair very easily by a kamikaze plane flying straight through the flight deck and down into the hangars below. And that usually was critical damage and would sink an aircraft carrier. Unlike the British, however, the British actually had a little bit of a technological advantage over aircraft carriers in the Second World War, like, for example, the HMS Ark Royal. And I actually, interestingly enough, learned this from an interview with Prince Philip. And I didn't conduct the interview, I watched it on YouTube, and he was talking about his experience in the Second World War in the Pacific, and he said that a kamikaze plane rammed right down into the Ark Royal, and he was watching this from an American cruiser, and the plane hit something on the aft deck, so, you know, just straight into it. And the American that was standing beside him said, oh man, what a shame, that one's going down for sure. Because with an American aircraft carrier, it would, but the British, interestingly enough, actually armored their flight deck. The entire thing had a several-inch steel-thick underplate under the wooden flight deck itself, so that Zero went flying down, blew off a little bit of the wood, and then just slammed straight into the steel plate and flattened out on it. So he said a British crew went right out to the back of the carrier deck, literally just pulled the thing off the side and swept away the rest of it, and then the aircraft carrier was operational again within minutes. So I was like, that's wild. I didn't know that. That's probably why they thought they sank the Lexington so many times. And look at that. Is that a... Wow, that's I think, a model of the Yamato. It looks a lot like the Yamato, but then again, this conning tower is kind of weird. But it looks like it. Really cool aircraft carrier, though, with a really neat history. Oh, look at that, a Dauntless. Let's see, I wonder if they have a TV... Yeah, they do have a TBF Avenger. The story you'll always hear in America is that, and this is a true story, by the way, is that George H.W. Bush actually flew one of these in the Second World War and suffered a severe concussion bailing out of one of them because it was shot down. He was the pilot of it. And when he bailed out, the back of his head actually hit the elevator on the rear of the Avenger and knocked him out cold. No one really knows how he survived that because, you know, he pretty much fell into the sea, knocked out cold with the parachute deployed. And yet he didn't drown or anything. So very interesting on that note, and really neat to see an aircraft carrier like this from such a time in America's history still existing. I didn't really know we had museum ships this old. And so with that, and I think I did, Matthew. I think that was the second one when we called up the, the general order. I think when we called up that general order, that was thrown in then.
Interesting.
But if he thinks it wasn't, we'll circle back to that and get to that here in a little bit. But still, nonetheless, a very cool ship. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we addressed that fairly well. And reread it again just to make sure I didn't miss anything, Matthew.
Yes, it was the one from Aquatico 50.
Yes.
Yes, he said, I visited the USS Lexington in Corpus Christi, Texas. It was nicknamed the Blue Ghost by the Japanese because they swore they sunk it 4 times but kept reappearing. It was decommissioned in 1991 but looks better than the Kuznetsov.
And I would still agree, it looks way better than the Kuznetsov. The Kuznetsov is so backwards and antiquated. I mean, it's a terrible ship, and the Russians even know it as well. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Charlie Nickel. He puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Charlie, for that. He says, sorry, but I missed the general order yesterday. 5+ self-imposed penalty assessment. Rules are rules. No break for me.
And thank you for the support, Charlie, and helping this channel to keep on running. Now, one thing I'll say is this. Never feel bad that you missed a Sunday fundraiser. It happens every Sunday. You never have to feel bad because you can always get to the next one. And if for some reason, Matthew, I did not throw in the right amount, we'll just tell them that we'll throw that in on the next Sunday. And if you can get a number for me, we'll make sure to put down a reminder here so that way it isn't missed if for some reason it was. Because I think
you can just check your incoming stuff on your app, and you can see if it was put in or not.
Got you. And so with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well, but never feel bad for missing a Sunday fundraiser because there's loads of them, and we knock it out of the park every single time. I mean, it's no question at all. We are the #1 channel on YouTube, the Lee Spring Army really is, for raising funds to help out Ukraine. I mean, like, we've gone above and beyond with the Sunday fundraisers. I don't know if it's because they are run through YouTube Give, so there's a lot of security around them. I don't know what it is that... really, honestly, I don't think it's any of that. I just think that we have one of the best communities on YouTube because no other channel has been able to fundraise like this one has. It's unbelievable and absolutely impressive. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, Charlie, and thank you so much once again for the support, and never feel bad for missing one, because there's always this upcoming Sunday. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have an $18 super chat from Cindy Mitchell once again, who says, I hear today that China and Russia and other nasty countries are trying to remove the US dollar as the world trade currency. It looks like maybe it is happening, and what are your thoughts?
No.
Sounds very similar to a poll that we put up a little while ago.
and I thank you for the support, but I'm gonna have to allay those fears immediately. There is no way in hell that the US dollar is going to be replaced by another currency, at least for the next few decades. No way in hell. What they're talking about is that the BRICS alliance is trying to, make an agreement. At least that's the news articles that have been spreading around going, oh, the dollar is finally going to be overcome. And it's just not true. Because what they're talking about is South Africa, India, China, Russia, and another country, I think it's Brazil, teaming up to try and create some kind of a new currency union or something similar. And if we add up the BRICS GDP, let's see, that currently contributes 31.5% of global GDP, while the G7 share has fallen to 30%. The BRICS is expected to contribute over 50% of global GDP by 2030, with a proposed enlargement. So, wait a minute, that's very interesting, because I was like, these are very optimistic numbers. Silk Road Briefing. I wonder who put out this website. It's not like anyone like China is trying to build a literal Silk Road right now. I wonder who in the world would publish such optimistic numbers like this.
Yeah, I wonder. It's like, if you click on that website, it's like, apply now, free money with no strings attached.
Yeah.
No catch. And everybody's like, oh, give me the money, give me the money. Then later they find out, oh, well, China controls our whole economy now. Great.
Do you want a train station? Do you want a nice bank? All right, so it looks like Wikipedia actually has some information. I'm going to go with this instead of Silk Road, because Silk Road's probably run by the Chinese government. Wasn't there some kind of like a sketchy website back in the day on the internet that used to be called the Silk Road?
Yes, a fun fact, there was a website called, I think it was the silkroad.com or something. It was on the dark web, and it sold all kinds of really bad things like on that website. And the guy eventually got busted for it, I think.
Yeah, he did. Interestingly enough, I think I watched a documentary on that. He got busted because he always operated the Silk Road website, like moderated and stuff, from a library, a public library. And so the FBI actually staged this entire thing where a girl was having a problem with her computer, so he got up to go help the girl, and they literally pulled a thirst trap on this guy, and everyone in this library was an FBI agent, so they swept the computer from where it was to another guy. He plugged a flash drive into it, loaded up a code that would allow them to look into his computer at any given moment, took the flash drive out, pushed it back to his spot, and by the time he came back, he had no knowledge that any of that had happened, and then, they got to figure out he was the guy who was running the Silk Road. But anyways, moving on from that and getting a real number, all 5 states that are in BRICS, the Russian Federation, China, India, South Africa, and Brazil, all of them combined have a GDP right now of $26.6 trillion. That's all of them combined. US GDP, as of right now, is $23.32 billion. So with all of these 5 countries combined, they're just a few $1 trillion above US GDP as a singular country. And then you add on the European Union to that, and they make up, something like another $18 to $19 trillion, the entire European Union, which is also part of the Western sphere. And you're looking at around $40 to $50 trillion, roughly, of GDP just made up of the United States and Europe alone. That's not including Japan, which is also a part of the G7, I believe, or South Korea, which is also another 1.7 trillion US dollars in GDP per year. I mean, there is no way in hell the BRICS, with such a weak economic base that they can hardly overdo the United States economy with 5 combined countries, and then, combine the rest of the Western world into our total GDP with our economic sphere. There is no way in hell they'll ever overdo the dollar, because the dollar is the currency of the Western world, and with a GDP like that, there's no way they can compete. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. There's a lot of stuff like that goes around on the internet, and it's all just panic talk. It's always, the internet is into getting a rise out of people. They want to freak you out. We try not to do that. That's why we keep everything light and as entertaining as possible on this channel with the war, because if someone is trying to get a rise out of you, they're doing that for some reason, either to get views, either to keep you watching, or something. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support, and a really good question. May not be necessarily Ukraine related, but a good question nonetheless. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right. And also, you'll see the poll running. Be sure to answer that one, because this poll got me chuckling. But anyways, moving on to our next Super Chat question. We have a $10 donation from none other than PsyOps. Let's see here.
He says censorship immediately begins.
He says, there was a report of an orc charity being, I think he meant to say compromised, but he said comprised. He says the equivalent of $25,000 was being spent on combat. Wait a minute. I don't know what this means. Let me send this over to the enforcer. I think it's an actual fact, but it sounds kind of odd. So let me send this over. They were sent, and then finish the sentence with what I sent you.
Got you. Marital aids, which were sent to... Oh, yeah, that is actually a true story. Yeah, I didn't put it in the news today because it was like really non-PG, but it's true. Psyops is absolutely correct. The Russians were running a fundraiser. So a Russian soldier was kind of like how Ukrainian soldiers do to raise money to buy stuff. And this dude put in a like $30,000. It was like $25,000, I think, like Psyops said. $25,000 order for drones. And some Ukrainian hackers hacked into this guy's computer and changed the order from drones, and there's really no other way for me to say this, so sorry for it, but adult toys. And so these Russian soldiers didn't get drones on the front line in the shipment. When the shipment finally arrived, it was nothing but that instead. And it's a true story from what we've seen and what I've looked around at on the internet. So that is actually a true story. It's just the one that we didn't cover today because while it's hilarious, I will admit completely that made me bust out laughing when I read it. I didn't want to share it because, you know, there's all kinds of folks watching this channel. There's kids watching this channel, and I don't want to bring up anything like that to them, you know. But anyways, with that, thank you for the support, Sobs. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Wubba. who says,
Wubba
yes, Wubba says, TP for your bunghole.
I need TP for my bunghole. Well, I thank you for the support, and I hope you enjoyed that little voice right there. But we are going to be trying to roll back voices a little bit more, because it seems like a lot of people just don't like them. I mean, like the hell, they are militant about not liking them, and you know, so yeah, we're going to start rolling them back a little bit. But I hope you.
I get no respect right here. I get no respect.
Oh man, you know, I'm telling you, man, that's got to be the most hated voice, like the Rodney Dangerfield one.
Man, Rodney Dangerfield started popping up in my like YouTube's like shorts recommended channel like nonstop for some reason. Have you been watching like his clips recently or something?
Who, me? No, I haven't been watching any of his clips for like maybe months at this point.
Jeez, man, I'm watching him. I'm thinking, geez, you really did have that impersonation down to a science.
I know, and you know what's crazy is that some of the haters would say it was a cheap impression. It's like that's like one of the best ones I do next to Sam Elliott and David Attenborough. It's like all the other ones are kind of mid. You know, I'm not gonna lie, they're not the greatest, but Rodney Dangerfield, Sam Elliott, and David Attenborough, in my opinion, are the best ones I do, like by far. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope we address that the best we can. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Alan Kenny, who says, will NATO be a nice fit in the Sevastopol naval base after the Black Sea Fleet gets the boot or sunk?
And what would be a good fit again? I missed that part.
The NATO,
a good fit in Sevastopol? Don't be ridiculous. Yeah. No, there's no way naval infrastructure in Sevastopol is good enough for a modern Western fleet. Now, Ukraine could use this, yes. But the West, oh man, we would probably have to dump a good bit of money into this thing to build up the port facilities where we're happy with them. I mean, hell, this would be the equivalent of Fort Hood in the Navy form if NATO was based out of this thing. It would not be good. And so with that...
Was it true that Fort Hood is living up to its namesake?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, from what I've heard, man, like, from everyone I've ever talked to that served in the military, Fort Hood is hell. Like, it's literal hell. Like, there's nothing that gets close to it on Earth, but there are, like, random murders that go on base, you know, and all kinds of stuff. It's just bizarre. And, you know, and then people say that all the buildings are, like, filled with mold. Like, they say it's terrible. But anyways, with that,
I saw a video of some guy, some soldier on the base, like at the gas station, like filming, like he was scared to get out of the car because he thought he was going to get robbed or something on base. Man, I thought it was a skit, but everybody was saying in the comments that it was actually legit. So apparently it's a rough base.
I mean, dude, it's rough as hell, man, from what we've heard. But let me go pull up Fort Hood. And interestingly enough, one of the gates to the base is actually named after a servicewoman that was murdered on the base. Here's Fort Hood right here. It looks bad. I mean, like, it just looks bad.
It looks rough. Welcome to the hood.
Man, dang. Naruto ramen.
Running for your life after you buy your ramen. Run! Run! You're gonna get robbed.
It's literally Naruto. It actually doesn't look that bad. Like, it's actually quality looking a little. Is that a pierogi?
No, that's a wonton, I think.
Dude, this is just weird. I don't know anime much, but I do know these because they're like a meme with how people got into them way too much, I think. But man, I mean, like, they don't make bad food here. Well, that kind of looks a little weird, but like, not bad food. What are the reviews on this place? 4.2. Like, it's not even a joke. It's actually just a good place to eat. Just got a weird name. But anyways, are there any pictures that were taken? Oh, wait a minute, there's one. What does Fort Hood look like? Oh, it's blurry. Come on.
Let's see. Can we have some more pixels, please?
Oh, here we go. Yes. These are the exact same barracks that the guys lived in before they were sent off to Vietnam to go fight in the Battle of Ai Trang back in '65. These things.
Man, it looks like Maxwell, like the stage of the buildings and everything.
Dude, these guys look like they're about to say, "You don't belong here." Like, it looks like they're looking at this guy like this, but it doesn't look. Honestly, this part doesn't look that bad. But you know, if you have served in the military and you were at Fort Hood, let us know in the comments. Did y'all know it was good there or not? Well, was it good there or not? I would like to know. But anyways, with that, I don't even know how we got onto that, but thank you. Yeah, Sevastopol Naval Port. I just don't think it could really happen without a massive amount of investment. It would probably have to be a whole of NATO approach. So it will probably take a little bit of effort. Made a riff on something there. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and also real quick, let's address a poll that is put up. The question is, will the US dollar be replaced by the yuan as the world's reserve currency? It looks like 10%, no, it went down to 9. 9% said yes, 82% said no, 8% said, I don't know, man. And on this one, I gotta say, it was kind of put up because I saw a couple of people saying this. I just wanted to get a feel for what people thought about it. The yuan or the yen or whatever you want to call it won't ever be replacing the US dollar anytime, at least in my lifetime, I don't believe. But it doesn't have to be destructive to simply replace the world's reserve currency. If the yuan becomes widely traded in, like for example, Russia and a lot of countries over there in Asia, that could start to prove very destructive to our interest in our economy in the West, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I would have to agree. The yuan will not overtake the U.S. dollar, most likely ever. Especially consider, these stupid articles. And when people read them, do not think I'm going at anyone who believes the article or anything. I'm not. But the articles are just stupid because they make it seem like these weak countries can sit there and actually compete in a little alliance. Like when they sit there and say, oh, Saudi Arabia, they're breaking ties with the United States. They're going to start aligning with the Chinese. Guess what? We found weapons of mass destruction in Saudi Arabia. Get them, or something like that. It's like, there's a little bit of a dangerous middle ground that exists during these instances, economically and also diplomatically, like with the Saudis. Like it's been stated recently that the Saudis are starting to try and break away from the United States, and they're starting to try and align themselves more so with the East, the Chinese, and so on. Well, if it ever goes bad enough, and considering that, yes, we do fight for oil, that's something of a joke, but it's serious. Oil is a very important resource in the modern world, so you must fight over things that keep your nation running and make sure that you still have the upper advantage over everyone else, and you're able to say who the oil is sold to. If the Saudis actually tried to go to China, we might sit there and say something like, oh, look at these guys in charge of Saudi Arabia, the royal family. Look, they're going around executing people all over the place. It's crimes against humanity. We need to go in there and stop this stuff. And then we go in there and we install a new government, and it keeps on our side. Because there's a very dangerous ground there. And economically, that kind of exists as well. Once these people try and do something like that and play ball, there's this little middle ground there where you can screw them over before they even get to the plate to be able to try and swing the bat, in a figurative sense. So I just don't think it'll ever overtake the yuan, and especially since the Chinese don't really allow people to just trade with the yuan. It's really strongly protected by the Chinese government, and usually just used for internal trading and trading with approved countries, which are few and far in between. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to PsyOps again. He puts in another $10 donation and says, can we get an LSA get well for Archie? He's at the vet and very sick, and get well, Archie. And I would assume that is probably a dog. But Archie, hopefully he gets well soon. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would hope as well that Archie gets better soon. Little Archie. I love dogs. I love dogs till the day I die. I love them so much. And I hate to know when dogs are sick. So I hope that the entirety of the LSA tells Archie to get well soon, because I would hope that Archie is back on his feet soon and doing little Archie things. Is he into archery? I would hope so. And so with that, thank you for the support. I hope we addressed that comment fairly well, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running as well, so that way we can wish little sweet puppers like Archie to get better. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
Now, because it's PsyOps, I assume that Archie's a dog, but now that I remember it is PsyOps, he could be talking about a person's at the vet. I don't know. But of course, just joking. But up next, we have a $5 super chat from Hal Rose, who says, Slava Law School.
And Slava the Law School. I actually did a little bit of the finalizing today. Actually, I did the last bit of finalizing, and so it is dead on. Once I graduate college, moving on to law school. So that'll be really cool. That starts in the fall, so I'll have an entire summer of free time to try and do videos and other stuff. Hell, I'll finally have the time I need to dedicate to doing things beyond the stream itself. And hopefully we can bring out all kinds of cool videos for y'all. Really thinking of a lot of gun reviews. I'm a big, and a lot of people know this, and I find it funny. I'm a big fan of guns and collecting guns. I think they're neat. I just think they're kind of cool. So we'll probably do a review on the Tommy gun that we got literal months ago. It was like January when I got this thing. Probably finally do a gun review on it. It's really neat. I mean, it's really, really cool. It is a legit auto ordnance Tommy gun. Auto ordnance still is around today. I think it was rekindled by some company, and they started producing Tommy guns and M1 carbines again. So, do a review on the Tommy gun, try and do some gun reviews. And if y'all like them, hell, we might make that a series, on the channel. We might even do other stuff. I would love to get into history videos, and all kinds of stuff, because of course, we cover this war, but I want the Lee Spring Army and the Enforcer channel to become a community that not only covers the war, but the war is always going to be a focal point of this channel until the war ends. But I also want there to be other stuff, interesting things that we can all watch and talk about and enjoy, and all kinds of stuff like that. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and also saying Slava Law School, because I can't wait to go there. Hopefully I do really good, and hopefully I pass the bar, because it doesn't really matter if you do good in law school per se. It just, and I better not say that for scholarship reasons, but it doesn't really matter if you do good in law school. It just matters if you pass the bar. That's really all that counts, is passing the bar.
That's if you're going to work for yourself, but if you're going to work for a law firm, you want to make sure those grades are in tip-top shape.
We're going to work for ourselves. And
Facts.
So, straight up facts. Put that in the fax machine right now. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support. Also, Big Dummy said, the Enforcer plus Gun Jesus collab. And if y'all don't know, he's talking about not Indiana. What am I talking about? Ian McKellen, I believe is his name. Hopefully I'm not getting that wrong, from Forgotten Weapons. I'm a huge fan of Forgotten Weapons. I think they're a really cool channel. Also a really big fan of Paul Harrell. I like Paul Harrell a good bit. And Garand Thumb, or Garand Thumb, he says Garand. It is Garand, but it doesn't matter. Potato, or tomato. That's a really good channel. I mean, like, their cinematography on Garand Thumb really beats everyone out. Like, there is no other channel out there that I can think of in really any other genre or category that does the cinematography as good as Garand Thumb is able to do with, like, the lenses, the lighting, and all that stuff. It is really, really good.
It is, really.
Well, with that, and Jay Lancaster said, don't disrespect the thumb. I'm not disrespecting the thumb, but here's one thing I have to pull up. I have to do this for everyone who's like a history nut with guns. John Garand's letter on how to pronounce, and let me go here. So I would watch the Forgotten Weapons episode, but I believe, let's see, when properly pronounced, there's many ways of pronouncing Garand. You know what? I'm so sorry. Hopefully, Matthew, the Forgotten Weapons will give us a pass, because I'm going to have to show this video here, because it is a thing that I'm very, very adamant about, because the guy who designed the gun actually has a specific way to pronounce his last name, because the gun is named after him. So,
hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another Forgotten Weapons.
Let me skip forward.
However, I have the columns of American Rifleman magazine in 1943. This was written to the editor, and it says, Editor, as requested, I enclose a copy of a letter from the G&C Merriam Company, publishers of the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, explaining my own preference as to the pronunciation of my name, John C. Garand, Springfield, Massachusetts. And the section of the letter he has enclosed says, an initial G hard, as in go, first A short, as in Harry, second A somewhat more obscure, as in errand, accent on the first syllable. or according to the Merriam-Webster system of marketing, Garand. So that is...
There it is. I know that a lot of people say Garand, and a lot of people here in the South say Garand, but it is Garand. And, you know, considering the guy designed, in my opinion, one of the best battle rifle of the Second World War. I'm not going to sit there and mispronounce his name. He did a great job. I love that rifle. It's a great one. So I always make sure to say Garand instead of Garand, although I grew up saying Garand. But with that, that is a rabbit hole like no other. With that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Carlos Gonzalez, who says, long live the LSA, and first time giving us super chat, and I hope this helps with the coffee fund.
Thank you so much for the support to the coffee fund. We will make sure to drink plenty of coffee. And of course, thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running as well. And we will make sure to get to that live chat right now. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question goes to Mark Slava Ukraine, who says, do you think the Kuznetsov will sail again? And I say no.
I say maybe, but it's a huge maybe. And we go to the Kuznetsov right now because we actually found it a while ago. It is right here. There it is. It's still in the ship docks right now. It actually caught fire during the war. It was a massive fire from what we were able to tell, which gutted most of the ship. Apparently it was not, at least from what we know right now, fire was not extensive enough to completely gut the ship. It just gutted a good amount of it. If a ship is completely gutted in a fire, usually it's signed off and they go and send it for scrapping. But this thing apparently is still working on refits, or they're making it look like they're still working on refits, so that way it seems they have an operational carrier. I'm highly doubting it, though, that this thing will really get out to sea again. I feel like it's a very low chance that it'll get out to sea and actually operate effectively again. Because it's just, it was a bad ship, first off. It had many problems when it ran at perfect parameters, and now it's been gutted by fire, and it's also undergoing refit. I just don't imagine that this thing can go to sea and be effective at all anymore, even in a low margin. So with that, thank you for sponsoring that live chat, and I hope we answered the live chat question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and the next one goes to Dark Warrior 137, who puts in a $5 donation and says, rest in peace, Discord. It was an honor to go down with the ship in the voice chat that night. It reminded me of the scene from the Kestrel sinking at the end of Ace Combat 5.
Well, I thank you for the support. I've never played Ace Combat 5. I haven't really played a lot of the Ace Combat games, but I know some people who do, and they say they're great. But it was kind of sad to bring down the Discord. It was also a huge relief as well, because from what we understand now, you know, and I'm not going to pick any bones about it, we actually found out that another channel that actually tried to bash us last night apparently sent over people to infiltrate our mod team, from what we've heard now from some people, and they were moderators on his channel the entire time, and they may have been part of what brought down the channel. It was incredibly, well, the Discord channel, it was incredibly annoying to have to deal with things like people misabusing their power and treating people poorly, because that's very stressful, because there's a lot going on. Like today, I got back just in time from doing everything else today to just be ready to run the show and get the show ready. That's all I had time for. And it's very stressful to try and find time to fit in, to figure out what kind of power are the mods abusing. You know, who have they banned? Like, they banned OZ Jeff Gray, and many of y'all may have known OZ Jeff Gray has been around for ages. He's been here forever. And we told these people when we promoted them to YouTube mods, and we're never doing that again, we said, do not ban anyone on the live chat. That's solely my and Matthew's responsibility. They banned OZ Jeff Gray from the Discord, and then they came over here and they banned him here. And it's like
now he's unbanned, and we keep telling him to come back, but I don't think he's come back yet to try it, because he's been given priority chat as well. So there is no way at this point that he cannot chat.
And there's no, yeah, he will be chatting. We also made Sika, which many of y'all know, a priority mod after the night where we thought he was drunk and then he wasn't, but we made sure to take a precaution and like make sure that he didn't do anything he regretted. So that he's also a priority viewer as well, at least in our little moderation thing on YouTube. But I know, and I see
it's funny. It's really funny when you think about it that all the people always say that the Ukraine YouTubers on the same team, but really, if you look at actions, you start to see that some people really aren't. Because at the end of the day, the goal of these channels is supposed to be to raise money for Ukraine. But when you see folks start, making their entire existence about trying to take someone else down, that starts to really show people's true colors.
And another thing that really showed the true colors of what we're talking about right here. And also, some of y'all, because, we were told a lot by people what had happened, so I went over there and watched the whole thing. The reason why we don't call out this person directly is because that's a violation of YouTube's harassment and cyberbullying policies, to sit there and call someone out on your channel and then send your viewers over there to stick on them and harass them. That's against the guidelines. And I know this. While we sit here and we go, okay, we'll let that slide. If we did that to that guy, what he's doing to us, he would sit there and go, oh, we go over there and report him. And, and then he'd stick his group on us to report us. But anyways, no, that guy's not on the same page, because if he was, then why in the world did he make it a point when we had nothing to do with him? And if y'all have followed a little bit, because we don't really make it public, once we had nothing to do with him after he blew us off for a month, and then another month when we were trying to get him on the year anniversary live show, he then wanted to sit there after we said nothing about him from then forward and start bashing our channel and the credibility of the news we deliver. He went on a crusade about that, and that's why we've been riffing on the guy. We haven't been riffing on the guy just because the hell of it. We're riffing on him because of that. Because we've never said...
If people can't start fights and they get upset that somebody does something back to them, that's basically what's happened here.
I've never said anything to discredit any channel's news. I've said things about making sure that donating to fundraisers, you trust it and you trust the system it works off of, and then of course use James Vasquez as an example because it's the best one we have, and also well before that as well, and then it came true with Vasquez. But we never go out of our way to try and discredit any channel, unless if, like, with one channel, for example, it was outright clickbait. And I forgot whose channel name it was, but someone asked us, hey, look at it. And I was like, their titles are, like, not true, like Turkey joining the war. That doesn't happen. But anyways, and see everyone in the chat saying, what's his name? What's his name? We're not saying the name because that would be harassment.
We have never called his name out, ever, and we never will, because that just gives the guy attention.
And I'm not going to name it out because it is harassment. I mean, if you pull up YouTube harassment policies and you go to the Google video, the first example they give is, what if two YouTubers are having a problem and a YouTuber goes and sticks his community on that other channel he's having an argument with? That is a violation of our guidelines. It literally says it within the first 30 seconds of their little informational video about harassment and cyberbullying on YouTube. They say it. This guy has done it like 5 or 6 times. Like 3 of those times it's been completely unsolicited. Like, we just had nothing to do with him. We just dropped him, didn't talk to him, and then he wanted to start it up. So now we're sitting here because we're always aggravated about how this guy sits there and discredits everything we do except for our fundraisers. And then he wants to sit there and act like it's uncalled for us to riff on the guy after he wants to drag us through the mud and lie to people about what we do and what we say. And no, we're not being passive aggressive. If it wasn't for YouTube's harassment policies, I would just call the guy out directly. But I know that unlike us, this guy plays dirty, and if we sat there and did that, he would be sitting there telling people to report us for harassment or something. So with that, and yeah, Observer said it, brigading. That's kind of like the technical term for what would happen there. That's called brigading. And we don't do that. That's why whenever we sit there and call out channels, like back when this beef started, I said, you know who you are, and it wasn't even to that guy, it was to another channel that's way smaller, and we're not going to call them out for the exact same reason. You know who you are, don't use our thumbnails, don't use our intro. And then he was using our thumbnails and intros, and we didn't know it, and then he admitted that in an email. And he even showed the email on stream and then just glossed over that part, and that's why the beef started, is because he thought he was guilty of something because he was doing it, and we weren't even accusing him of it, it was someone else. But anyways, we're moving on to the next one. That's enough on that. Why in the world even waste effort on that guy? We are on to the next one. But thank you once again for the support.
All right. So with that being said, we're on to our next super chat. And we have a $5 donation from Craig Platel, who says the CUAS is the Vampire system, which is an adaptation of the APKWS, which is a laser-guided hydro rocket which has been in use for quite a while.
And interesting. I thank you for the support and sharing that with us, because I didn't know that thing was actually that old. It had a lot of concept art, so I was like, I guess it's new. Because a lot of the new stuff always just has concept art, like the supposed 6th gen aircraft are making nothing but concept art. But still, I thank you for the support and sharing that with us, because I didn't really know a lot about that system, and I would love to learn as much as I can about every system. Like, hell, I remember one time we literally got sent to a clinic on the Rapid Dragon, and I learned how good the Rapid Dragon is, and I'd love to learn stuff like that. Always open to people sharing things with us that are like informational and very interesting. I love that stuff. And so with that, thank you for the support. Thank you for sharing that little tidbit of knowledge with us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Trister1. He puts in a $5 donation and says, Ricola for allergy season, and the live chat question, please.
Oh my god, dude, that's hilarious. I actually have a Ricola in my mouth right now while I'm talking.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's what I thank you for the support to the Ricola Fund, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, we're going to get to a live chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the live chat question goes to, let's see, Noob Gaming, who says, what is the launch speed for most HIMARS rockets?
The launch speed, I'll be honest with you, I don't really know off the top of my head. So let's go and look at the HIMARS missiles. And let's see here, the M142, HIMARS, la 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 la. So let's see here, the armor, the engine, what kind of missiles can it use? Ah, dang, it doesn't really list them here. So let's go down a little bit. I gotta tell you, those things look cool. I really like them. But let's see, the ATACMS, ground launch small diameter bomb. Holy moly, whatever a PRSM is, that thing can go out to 500 kilometers.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I'm not seeing any speeds being listed here. Let me just try and pull this up. What is the speed of a HIMARS missile? And there's like 50 of them. It's not 53 miles per hour. No missile is in the air at 53 miles per hour. Let's see. Also, West Anderson, sorry, the last weapon designed in Springfield was the M14, not the M16. If I said that, I am wrong, because I think the M16 was made by Colt, at least the original ones. And then Armalite made the AR-15, which is what the M16 is based off of. But, dang, it doesn't look like there is... Wait, hang on. The GMLRS missiles fired from the HIMARS in Ukraine are capable of traveling at speeds of Mach 2.5, or roughly 1,918 miles per hour, and that's at their top speed. And they only keep that for a short while, most likely at the near to the end of the burn of their propellant. But that is incredibly fast. I mean, like most MLRS rockets, from what we understand, are subsonic. That's why you can hear them flying off, and they just sound like a whoosh. And when they come flying in, you just hear another whoosh, because they're, you know, slower than the speed of sound, so you can hear them before they hit. But with these, not so much. They're just going to slam right into you, apparently. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support. And I gotta say, this has got to be my favorite MLRS in the world. These are just amazing looking. And they're also very amazing in their operation as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right. And up next, big shout out to Junebug72, puts in a $4 donation. We also have a $2 donation from Dupper Bob. And sadly, no comments on either of them. But Junebug and Dupper, thank you very much for your support. And also, something I saw from the live chat that I want to address. From Drew Robinson. He says, I'm not getting notifications anymore for some reason. And Drew, you are probably the, I would say, 50th or 60th person that has told me that in the last 2 or 3 days. And I think YouTube has started to crack down on the war content again. They went through this phase, I think, a couple of months back. And I have a feeling we'll probably be, I guess, like taking out the algorithm. I really don't know what the term is for it. But we'll probably be going through a little period of stagnation along with other Ukraine channels as well, because that's just the nature of YouTube.
And we haven't been age restricted tonight, thankfully, because that usually happens at this point. But Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I don't know what it is with the notifications not going out to people. YouTube largely controls that because a lot of y'all have subscribed and hit the bell button, and yet they still don't send out notifications. I don't know what it is, but it's most likely YouTube once again trying to curb war coverage because they're also age restricting us a good bit. But with that,
one way to try to get around that is because I saw on our stats page that only 19% of our subscribers have clicked the bell for all notifications. Make sure you click the little drop-down box next to the subscribe button and press all where that bell pops up, or otherwise it might not send you notifications.
they might not. They might not at all. So make sure to click it. Click it. Wait a minute. Only 19%? I don't think I've ever seen that.
I just noticed it yesterday. I was like, only 19%? How's that possible?
19%? What do you mean? Everyone should have the bell button on. Hit that bell button. Hit it now.
I never click the bell button on any channel I'm subscribed to, but somehow I still get notifications.
And Serge Segeli said, me either, but I never have gotten notifications for this channel. I just have to manually search for this channel, then scroll until I find it, then click the channel, then watch. I'm sorry about that, everyone. I don't know what that is. It may be, this is actually a little bit of a hindrance to us. We run so many streams that they may actually be curbing the notifications because they only give a limited set of notifications per a given amount of time. So that may be why it's like intermittent or sparse. But then I don't really know how to explain where they don't come in at all, because they should come in at some point. And from what I understand, we get 3 notifications to subscribers over a 24-hour period, and that includes everything. So you can get a notification for our community posts, our videos, or our streams. And we only get 3 of those every 24 hours, and then it resets. But then under that definition, we shouldn't ever run into a problem where no one's getting notified if they have the bell button on. So I don't know what it is, but if y'all hit that like button, maybe they'll notify y'all. I mean, like, seriously, I'm not even saying that as a joke. The more likes we get on these streams, the more it's spread out to folks. The more notifications are gotten, the higher up we get in the algorithms. So it's easier for people to see. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. Sorry about that, though. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Yes. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Lewis, who says...
Peter, the horse is here.
I'm sorry,
no, he doesn't say that. He says nothing, actually. And he puts in a $20 donation. So I guess you could have filled in the blank and said, Peter, the horse is here. But Lewis, thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support, Lewis, as well. You're helping this channel to keep on running. And he didn't leave a comment, but the support helps us out a great deal in keeping this thing rolling. And I got to thank you so much once again. And so with that, we're going to be moving on to the next one, but thank you so much, Lewis, for helping us to keep this thing rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and let's see.
Oh, we got a Russian bot in here. Oh, let me get that one. I'm going to get him.
I already got him.
Ah, dang it. Man, we were in a competition to get that one. But anyways, we are on to the next one.
All right, and... let's see. Trister once said, or I'm friggin' sick of notifications from all my apps, but maybe I'm like too much. Get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn. You know that Clint Eastwood movie where he's got the Garand and he's like in some bad neighborhood or something?
Uh-uh.
Oh, well, anyway, I saw a clip of it on YouTube. I was like, maybe you've seen that clip too, since it like hit the algorithms and it got millions of views, but it's apparently not, sadly. And so with that,
you know what they say.
And wait a minute. Fethdar said, "Call him out.
Call him out."
Oh, man.
Well, that's one thing that will become a integral part of the channel is call them out. We'll never stop doing that till the day we drop dead.
No, we never will. And that, well, anyways, I won't go. You know what? We said we're not going to waste any time on the guy. We're not. With that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Craig Platel, who says, I believe your T90M numbers are too low. My research shows about 56 pre-war and 20 to 40 delivered since.
How many T90Ms are there? And you may be correct. Let's see. Around 1,000 T90s with variants have been manufactured, but that doesn't give us the exact... up to 100 T90Ms, according to Frontier India. Let's see what we get for Army technology. Huh, this was an export version in 2011. Dude, that paint job they gave it was terrible. I mean, like, this looks like it was done with a spray, like a spray paint can. That's awful. But let's
And that's
see.
the moment the tank said, I get no respect around here. I get no respect.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. We get no respect around here. No respect. I went to the doctor the other day. I asked him, hey, what's wrong with me? He said, you got a case of the ugly. I said, is there a cure? He said, it's terminal. Oh, man, I'm telling you. But anyways, let's see here. Was that one good? Did that one sound like him?
Yeah, I mean, it sounded pretty close.
Oh, okay. Well, not good enough that time, but it looks like they said up to 100, so you may be right. But I swear, wait, here we go. March 2023, 22 are ready to be used on an automatic, wait, hang on. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. That's about the ammunition, sorry. That brings, or 50 now are rounds for Tobe. They might not last. Let's see here. So it looks like you may be correct. I feel like I got the original number, I believe, from Wikipedia. You know, and of course, Wikipedia isn't always the most reliable source, but it is the quickest one to get to. And during a stream, you always have to try and grab the quickest bit of information. Don't want people sitting around for nothing. And let's see here. T90M. How many do they say were made? Doesn't look like they actually say. At least as I'm trying to speed read this thing. Let's see here. I don't see a number here. So you may be correct. It may be a little bit higher. And so with that, thank you for the support. Thank you for clarifying that, because I think you may be correct. The number may be higher, because it is very weird for them to have taken, at least according to our numbers, over 50% losses in that tank class, and then to keep on using them. And so with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. And thank you once again for helping us to make sure the news is as factual as possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Starcat7. I'm not going to do that anymore because that sounds rough. But
oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. People trying to imitate me. Oh man, it's terrible all the time. All the time. I'm telling you, it's awful. It's terrible. Get on to the next one, will you?
And the next one, and this one goes to Starcat7. He says, "Hi folks, I hope y'all had a good day. And did you folk put my donation in for the fundraiser? If not, can it go to the next one? And good night all." And Starcats, that was actually what me and the enforcer were yapping about earlier, that y'all probably didn't know what we were talking about. I texted him and told him to check. So we're going to have to check our incoming PayPal, because I believe that's where you sent that to, and see if we did put that in. Because honestly, I cannot recall.
1 second. Wait a minute. I didn't know it went in through PayPal. I thought it was a super chat, but let me check.
Oh, well, maybe it was a super chat, actually, now that I think about it. I can't recall either one.
So we didn't get anything on PayPal. So I think it came in through a super chat. So Starcats, make sure to just reach out over Twitter and tell us how much was supposed to be sent. We're going to look back through and see if we did send it, and if we didn't, we will add it towards the next fundraiser. If we miss that, I'm sorry, because usually we put down a reminder on that, and I think I did put it in that night, but I don't know. We'll make sure to circle back though and make sure that we did get the correct number put in before. And so with that, thank you for the support. Sorry for the confusion there in case if it did happen, and we will make sure to put it towards the next Sunday if we didn't. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Joe Little, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Has the LSA seen the YouTube channel Oxide, Soviet Cold War tanker versus Russian modern tanker loadout, 72 version?"
Now, I don't think I've personally seen the video, but I have heard of the YouTube channel Oxide. Let me pull them up and make sure I'm thinking of the right one. Let's see here. Oxide. I swear I've heard of this guy before. Let's see, he's got the little Finnish, like, creature thing under the helmet there. But I swear I've heard of this guy. I've never seen any of his video thumbnails, though. But I feel like I've watched him. I haven't watched that video, though. I would show it on our channel, but it may be a copyright thing, because when we showed that Forgotten Weapons clip, people can, like, protect their intellectual property on YouTube. That's why it's never smart to play video clips from other YouTubers, because you may be violating their, well, you probably are violating their copyright. But I would show it if I could. And so with that, I thank you for the support. I hope that does answer the question the best I can. And I'll be trying to see about looking at that video after stream, but I swear I've heard of that guy before somewhere. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Bilbo Jenkins, who puts in a $5 donation and says, Dad always thought laughter was the best medicine, which I guess is why several of us died of tuberculosis. My God.
Oh my God, that is dark. But reread that again. That was so dark it threw me off. I need to hear that one more time.
Let's see. Dad always thought that laughter was the best medicine, which is why I guess several of us died of tuberculosis. I have a feeling that should be read in like a Rodney accent.
No. Oh man. That's
Oh,
such
yeah,
a
Dad
bad-
always thought that laughter was the best medicine. I guess that's why some of us died of tuberculosis.
Oh man, I'm telling you, my doctor wasn't that. My dad wasn't that smart either. Oh man, I'm telling you, he used to tell us that laughter was the best medicine. I guess that's why about 4 of us died from tuberculosis. Oh man, I'm telling you, it's terrible around here. And he was a real mean guy. Oh man, real mean too. Oh, I'm telling you, he used to beat me until I was unrecognizable because he said I looked better that way. Oh man, I'm telling you, it was a rough life. Terrible, terrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, you got a freebie right there. But with that, thank you for the support. I hope we addressed that fairly well. And in seriousness, laughter is the best medicine. That's one thing that we always do on this channel. It is a conscientious thing I make sure I do, is to make sure that we try and keep as light as possible. Because, you know, I don't know if people get it or not, but there are people who have a high stress level when dealing with this war. It's a very stressful thing. It's a very stressful thing for me, but I don't let that bleed through when we cover the news. And so I always make sure to keep a light and happy tone, because there's people watching from all over the world. There's Ukrainian soldiers watching. There's people from, you know, here in the West watching that have a lot involved in the war. There's people with families over there. And I never want to make it to where it seems like the whole world's going to come crashing down on them. So we always keep a very light tone. And we always want to make sure that folks are getting a little bit of a laugh here and there. And, you know, even if it is at the expense of some Russians, I'll make sure to keep it light and keep it running. And another thing, Matthew, I don't think people get about this channel is that the whole thing largely is geared around the fundraisers. Like, you know, of course, we of course have to get support from viewers to keep the thing running. But that's why whenever we tell people, if y'all are financially strapped, you have to pick in between supporting us and supporting a fundraiser, support the fundraiser. That's what it's about. I don't think people get that. Like, you know, we would rather sacrifice news quality to save more Ukrainian lives through the fundraisers than we would to sacrifice Ukrainian lives to cover news, because that's a very superficial decision to make, to sit there and go, well, I'd rather please this random person on YouTube than possibly raise another $50 that could save someone's life. You know, that's how I run this thing. That's my mindset doing this. But still, with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. Laughter is the best medicine, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $2 super chat from Rocco World Domination, who says, Igor.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Rocco World Domination has been around for a good while, and I've got to thank you so much once again for being a longtime channel legend and also helping this thing to keep on running. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Lauren, who puts in a $2 donation and says, a drone fund, LSAF, and take a question from the chat.
And thank you for the drone fund. We've been trying to get, just to keep everyone updated, we've been trying to find someone to get these guys in the 231st a drone. You know, I told you all a while ago we were trying to work on that. Haven't still gotten anyone, so I've just decided we're going to buy the drone outright ourselves and just send it to them. So that's the plan now. So thank you for supporting the drone fund. You know, of course, no, one thing I want to make clear, do not send in a super chat saying that you're supporting the drone fund like a lot, like massive amounts or anything, because then I don't really like that. We always want to make sure that the fundraisers are run through YouTube Give. We never want anything to be fundraised for outside of YouTube Give. But still, thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have another $20 super chat from Lewis. And thank you very much, Lewis, for the support. He says, can you show this clip? Dodgeball Russian girl intro on YouTube, just for the laughs for the chat. And thank you.
I will pull that up. I feel like the title, though, it's a little spicy, but we'll pull it up on the second screen.
What makes you think that?
I don't know. I don't know, but let's see. Okay, may not be that spicy. Oh, wait a minute. It comes from a movie called Dodgeball, though, and I'm going to get copyrighted to hell and back if I play it.
We will.
But I do Thank you for the support, Lou. Sadly, we can't show clips like that, especially from big movie studios. Like I believe that was made by Universal, because we would get dragged through the mud. Like we showed an 8-second clip from Saturday Night Live before on this channel, and they almost gave us a copyright strike. Like it was literally just one step away from a copyright strike just for showing 8 seconds of a clip. We are so scared of doing that, but still. Thank you for the support.
Oh man, we once ripped off Universal, and they universally came down and busted our kneecaps. Oh,
Oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. Oh man, it's terrible, especially from the companies. Oh man, I was out there the other day. I was watching a movie, and Universal came by and they said, "Hey, you're too ugly to be watching that." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh man, I'll teach you." And he knocked my kneecaps off. Man, I'm telling you, it's terrible. But anyways. We're here on to the next one, but thank you once again, Lewis, and I hope you understand.
yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Slava something that we still cannot say, even to this day. But thank you very much for the super chat. And they said Wagner leveled the city they wanted. Why even fight?
And yeah, that's a good point. They have leveled the city that they're supposed to be liberating. I don't understand how it's liberation when you're leveling the whole city. I mean, like 80 years ago, passable. I mean, like in the Second World War, that's really the only way you can uproot enemy forces. That's understandable. In the modern world, though, especially from the Russians who say they're a modern force with modern weaponry, why the hell do they have to level a city to take the thing? That's not liberation anymore. That's just barbarism by modern standards. And so with that, thank you for the support. That makes a lot of sense to me as well, and I hope we address that fairly well on top of that. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and the next one goes to Philip Fixes, who puts in a $2 donation himself and says, "Quit getting baited." That's rabbit hole time in LSA.
and quit getting baited into rabbit holes or something else.
A rabbit hole.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I do thank you for the support. I'm really easy to bait into rabbit holes because so many things are interesting to me. Like, actually, when we got that iMac radio transmitter, like, vacuum tube looking thing today, I, like, went down a rabbit hole. I pulled up the name on the radio transmitter tube that it was called, and I started looking at little manuals for it and what it was used for. Like, I'm naturally like that. I'm very sorry about that, though. But I do love a good rabbit hole. I enjoy rabbit holes. They're great. I love them. But with that, thank you for the support. So sorry, though. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are out of super chat questions. So we are moving on to our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. JP's RCs, Rumpelstiltskin, C-Fay, Cliff Simonson, Dark Warrior 137, Mark Hodges, Paul Scholes, and I thought there was another one, but that's all. They said, the Morse code says, that offensive is coming soon to a Russian near you, Ukraine.
And quit being, oh yeah. For some reason, I thought that was a question. That's the sound of money. And also, I thank y'all for deciphering that Morse code message. It is a true Morse code message. Still stands up to this day. It was made today, so I would hope it'd stand up still